And there we go. We are live with my good friend Andorman on the forums. You want to say hi?
Hi, how's it going?
He has helpfully set up how we're going to be talking about these errata changes that have came to Malifaux. And we're going to be going through them, basically structures. So we have a couple headers, quality of life changes that he did, some quality of life buffs that they added to models that weren't doing so well. Some models they rework so that you're kind of just like forced to be into a keyword instead of just like these generic good models. Then we have all the nerf batted models that were just kind of, hit upside the head. We have some bug fixes, we can call it, things that probably just should not have been in the game and are now not in the game. And then we have some nice quality of life changes to masters. And yeah, you organize these formats. Do you want to say anything about them before we just start getting in?
No, that's the general category. They did some big changes with four of the masters in particular. A little bit of minor bug fixing, like you said, and then yeah, finally we got around to touching some of the explorer stuff that has been causing issues across the competitive scene for a while. So it was definitely interesting to see. But yeah, let's just get into it.
All right. Oh, 1 second. I was just.
I'm getting an audio loop.
All right. Sorry. I just wanted to kind of make sure the audio is working well. And
Okay.
yeah, we're just going to get into it. Here are the errata changes. You can find them very easily on the weird website right there in news. And currently, the app cards have all changed to have the current erratas. And they'll tell you on the card what errata version of the card you're looking at, which is kind of convenient. You can also go and buy these, I believe, on Wargame Vault if you want the physical version of the cards. And otherwise, they're also all available on a Dropbox folder, which is what which we'll be using to pull up the card text. So, now that all that's out and the way, let's start into the first big change. First nice quality of life change, the restriction language regularizations. You want to talk about that while I go find it and pull it up on the...
Yeah, so this kind of came to a head with the release of Klaus, just because the way his act trigger was structured was just really unique, in that the entire thing is in italics. And so it kind of highlighted a gap in the language of trigger timing and restrictions and declarations. Um, and so now they've just gone back and clarified that. So in italics, we can have either special restrictions or targeting restrictions. Um, and so a special restriction is going to be something that is just restricting the circumstance in which one can declare something, like once per, or a certain requirement, like being within an inch of blocking terrain. And then another restriction would be in targeting. And the difference between these is that targeting restrictions can effectively never be ignored. They're just something you have to follow. They're not something that can be ignored, with some things that let you ignore special restrictions, like in particular this Klaus trigger, and then
The
the Seamus
mean
bonus action.
Seamus, yeah.
Yeah.
Remove a model from the game.
And so, yeah, this was, I think, a really elegant way of going after it, where they just clarified the rules and gave us some really nice examples that are clear and explicit, instead of going after any of the particular models or their specific interactions. And so this is kind of helping people figure things out in the future and future-proof more designs. So I think it's pretty great.
Yeah, just a nice little change. I think that's all that really needs to be said about it. So we'll just move on to healing. They just really made the healing timing chart more readily available.
And not even readily available. This was not clear at all from anything that existed before. So they made a healing chart,
Fair.
which was necessary because it was a mess, and they've been playing around with a variety of new abilities that make having to figure out the timing of these things pretty critical.
Yeah, I like the changes. I mean, this does a little bit sad, guaranteed that Nexus can't, heal past full, but whatever. I wasn't able to play that way anyways ever. So, uh, I think we'll just move on from that. Where is the obey thing written in? But either way, our next one.
The FAQ, yeah.
Okay.
So one of the quality of life things they did, it was change to how triggers work with actions. So things like obey or just like you aren't able to do things with an ability that attaches upgrades or names a particular model. But what they changed it to is that if the base action doesn't do those things, then you're still allowed to take the base action and just pretend that the trigger doesn't exist. So that's a little bit of a buff to some interactions with models that had nice abilities, but maybe were being completely invalidated for those effects based on a trigger.
Yeah, like you can now use Ivan. I mean, not actually obey the ability, but if you ever found a way to command Ivan, you could actually take his attack action instead of not being able to do it. And when I'm talking about obeying masters, they added the fun text where I can't find it, but
the Reva can't kill herself.
You can, if you are controlling an enemy model. Oh, here it is. So choosing to suffer damage. You can choose to suffer the damage. You cannot choose to kill yourself. So that's nice. Reva 2 can no longer be obeyed to just not exist anymore.
Yeah, and there were some weird interactions where, not obeys obviously, but anything where you have control over effect and make a decision could sometimes lead to some unfortunate interactions there.
And then the final one, before we start hitting up some models, is going to be they clarified Take the Hit Vendetta.
Yeah, I've been trying to explain this to people for like 2 years now, but now I finally have an FAQ that does it for me, so that's nice.
Oh my god!
But basically, a verb and a noun are different parts of speech and mean different things. So when something says targeted, it means something different than target, even though these are related terms.
Here we go. I did like that they literally brought grammar into the FAQ. I thought you would actually get a kick out of that, so I'm glad that you did.
It was great.
But yeah, that's pretty much all we have for the general FAQ / errata core rule changes. Is there anything there that we didn't quite clarify that you think is worth mentioning?
No, that's all. We can move on.
All right. And onwards we go to our first model that got changed. A nice little quality of life buff, the Bulltongan.
These models have been unplayable ever since their inception and have been on every list of what are models that you wish you could play but can't. And this is just a really elegant way of doing it. They retain their kind of anti-scheming role with Homeward Bound. They gain a little bit of utility in it in both of their crews. They lose their phase-specific stuff, which was interesting that they had that. And they never quite fit in their other keyword, Savage, because they didn't really have any text on the model that fit with that other than the old ways, even though every single model in Savage has hard to kill, and it really makes sense with how their abilities work. So just finally giving that to Bulltongan really moved them into a spot where this is a model that is going to see the table now.
All right, yeah. I these aren't factions I play, so glad to have you here, giving him the hard favorite on this model.
Yeah, it's great. It basically has all the things that it needed to be able to see the table.
All right, well that's nice. I'm still a little hesitant on this guy because I'm not exactly sure what he's doing, but he is a 5-cost model that is significant and hard to kill. So he'll do something for sure.
Yeah, just very fast. So it's yeah, and I think that's going to be. It's not going to be a common pick necessarily, but it should see play in some crews where that's what you need to score points, I think.
I mean, especially in Vassal, where favorable terrain, there are so many maps where if you just don't have a way of ignoring severe terrain, then you're just kind of screwed. So favorable terrain is just a very nice pickup for this model to be able to, walk, deadly pursuit, bam, you have your ley line or something.
Yeah, quite possibly.
All right, onwards to our next little model. We have the Bloodwretch.
Yeah.
Another hard to kill edition. Just slapping this on everybody.
Yeah, same issue. Fast model, but it was awkward because it usually died. And the other awkward thing about this is that it has all of these things that act like you want to be playing around with its health pool. It's on the prowl where it heals one. It has drink blood where it gets to heal based on its damage, but then it just was 5 wounds to 5 and died as soon as something looked at it. So giving it hard to kill really turns on all of these little healing tricks, and I think are going to put it in a spot where there's going to be a lot of situations where it can more than pay for itself. Especially with the new bonus action it gets, where just bonus action deals the damage to everything with it one.
There are very few bonus actions as good as that, I think.
Yeah.
I mean, not even a TN flip. It's just take one. That's really strong.
Yeah, absolutely.
And it's a tactical, so all those incorporeal guys, you get to stick it to them.
Yeah, and the other thing is that with Frenzied Charge, this is a model that conditionally can just do 3 guaranteed pings with no resist to a particular enemy model. And it's 7 stones at that point, so maybe you don't do it very often, but it's an interesting option to add to the faction.
All right, moving onwards to our next nice little buff model. We have the Wing Plague, a model I have never seen on the board.
Yeah, you want to take this one?
Yeah, I still don't know exactly where we're going to see him, but move 6 is definitely a lot better than move 5 on a flyer. And adding the Plague Spreads ability is, pretty good. I don't know if that's really going to change anything about him, though.
Yeah, it's interesting. They can go 12 inches. Like, if you save it for last activation somehow, it can go 12 inches and try to hit something with its claws. It then gets a guaranteed blight token on something else, maybe, and then if it activates, they get a blight token, or if they kill it, they get a blight token.
Yeah.
So it kind of has a guaranteed 2 blight token package that maybe hits something on its way in. Is that good enough? I don't know. I don't play Plague.
And then dies into more blight tokens.
Yeah.
So, I mean, yeah, they really got the idea of, like, guaranteed blight tokens, which is definitely nice for Plague. It's not... I don't really know if it's saving the keyword, though. Plague's been a keyword that's been kind of, like, iffy, I would say, at least from competitive format. You're never really seeing it in Outcast.
But good Outcast players who I've spoken with enjoy it quite a bit and have seen success. So there's something there.
Yeah, I mean, a lot of nice explosions, a lot of big guaranteed damage because of the blight token. So there's definitely something to it. And for cost, I think you can justify... I think 4 cost kind of allows you to have a Suicide Bomber that's so mobile. And the 2 extra inches, I think, is what's going to enable that more than anything before.
Well, the guaranteed blight token at end phase, I think, is also big.
Yeah, I'll be honest, I don't even remember what the Plague Spreads ability did. I know
just
it wasn't...
3-inch push.
It was just a 3-inch push?
Yeah, it just didn't have the guaranteed blight token on it.
Okay. I kind of figured, because I remember it didn't have the blight token. I just didn't remember like what else it did. But yeah, that's it. If we see Plague more, we might see this guy. This is one of the ones I'm more iffy on. We'll see.
Way better than it was. Still maybe not good enough.
Next we have the Drachentuber. This is your Lovechild, so... you playing it?
The kind of weird thing that we don't see is that it still just doesn't have an engagement range. There's obviously ways of playing around that in the faction, or in the keyword rather. There are tools to kind of try to mitigate that, but it's still kind of annoying. Being a stone less makes it a lot easier to fit into lists, though 8 stones for what it did was just a kind of awkward cost for it, so the 1 cost reduction definitely helps. And just got some quality of life stuff, like Containment Suit is nice. It brings it in line with the other similar models in this class that we've started seeing, like the containment unit, and then light it up. Kind of got the flavor of its old bonus action, but just gave it a lot more flexibility on that utility. So it already saw some play in some lists before. It sees play in more lists.
Well, I mean,
now.
They've Outcast been talking about how they have no good marker removal. This is their only marker removal now, and
they've been picking up more in burns. But yeah, you're right. They're getting access to more of it, more reliable of it.
Yeah, range 10 removes a pylon. I guess I don't know.
Yeah, it's a very flexible action. It's condition removal. It's marker removal. I guess it's a shockwave that does things sometimes, otherwise. But I don't think you care that much about the burning too. But the just remove any condition in an AoE is great, and marker removal is great, and sometimes you do both.
Did you ever care about the flame wall trigger that they removed?
No, it was literally useless.
Yeah, because you basically had to hit them twice with your attack in order to even attempt to get the trigger.
Yeah, and there wasn't any synergy with having a pyre on the field anyway. I guess it didn't do anything for the crew.
Yeah.
So.
All right, well, that's pretty much rocking. I think maybe we'll see them in some scenarios where you need marker removal. But other than that, I don't know. If
being able to stand on your own mines is cool. So
that is true. They now finally have a model that's ignoring the hazardous terrain that Von Shield makes. So maybe we'll see a little bit of that.
Yeah.
Yeah. Next up, we have Barbados, one of the coolest looking models in the game.
Yeah.
Or Barbaros. Cool. Sorry, Barbados is the pirate from Pirates of the Caribbean.
Indeed.
Barbaros. He gained the return keyword. I wonder what that is hinting towards. It can't be anything significant, right?
Yeah, I'm sure not. I don't think there are any Nephilim models that people would like to see return.
Yeah, is there a master that's linked to I don't think there's a master linked to Barbaros that's dead currently in the lore. No, probably not. All right, well, we got the challenge action removed because that was such an important one for him. But we gained a little bit. Nephilim loyalty.
Just kind of whatever.
It's just
the big thing.
Yeah.
Got caught in the ring, Brood Fighter, and didn't increase into this defensive stat, which it really consolidates his role. So Brood Fighter is just reworked regen that comes with a little bit of extra utility, which is great. That just helps him get value out of his regen even at the start of the game when it's not doing anything. And then Defense 6 and Caught in the Ring really secure his frontline brawler kind of a role. Before he could struggle with that a little bit, because Defense 5 is sometimes not good enough.
Yeah, I would generally say I'd much rather have Defense 6 than Willpower 6 in most scenarios. And I guess this is going to put that to the test a little bit, but at least defense is almost always needed, whereas Willpower is like more crew specific.
Yeah, exactly.
So
and Cage Fighter is less of a blank ability on his card now, so maybe it happens more than ever.
Oh, that's true, because he's actually Defense 6. He can actually maybe try to win this duel against Stat 5 models.
Or Set 6, but just didn't have the card or something.
Yeah.
Happens sometimes.
It does, but at least against Stat 5 ones, you can stone it if you want to just whack them back for 2, 3, and 4.
Yeah, it's just overall just makes his card more coherent, which is nice.
Yep. So I think we might be seeing a little bit more Barbaros, and I'm excited for that, because honestly, this is one of, like, especially the alt one I'm showing now on screen, is definitely one of the coolest models to see on the board. And I to point out to the comment, I kind of think they are bringing back Lilith. I don't know. We'll see. All right, Therian Quellers.
So here we see the iteration on Counterspell. Counterspell has been just a really awkward ability forever. The RL6, and that it just requires him to discard a card has always been kind of, sometimes it matters. When it's good, and usually it's useless kind of ability. But now they're bringing back like real Counterspell. so you just can't declare triggers in opposed duels with a target if you put anti-magic field on them. So that's really cool as a defensive tech to have access to.
No, it's insane. I think this is definitely going to be like one of the more taken models now in Witch Hunter again. Maybe even outside of Witch Hunter. I think the tome restriction is going to be pretty heavy because honestly, he doesn't do a lot else besides that.
And did he always have Gunfighter? I don't remember.
Yes.
He did. Just didn't matter because the rest of his card was blank. Got it.
No, he had Buried to the Other World, and now he has Suppress Magic and Gunfighter.
Okay. Yeah, Gunfighter is so incredibly useful for making this model not blank text more of the time. So, yeah, he's going to see table time now.
Yeah, and Buried to the Other World was the does damage when a model summoned nearby, and that's pretty much, historically, has always been a pretty useless ability to have on a model. It's kind of cute in certain situations, but most of the time it just doesn't do anything.
Yeah, absolutely.
So yeah, no, now that he's Gunfighter, he can actually be in a melee fight. His attacks aren't the greatest. His health isn't the greatest. He can use Soul Stones, though, so... I mean, that is the logic on why we'll see Anti-Magic Field and other factions that want to dive in. I think, honestly...
Like he's always been midfield support, and now he just is midfield support that can not be completely screwed over when something dives.
I think we're going to see Bashal possibly hire this guy, because any beater that goes in and you can't declare triggers against is normally very resilient.
Especially with Leadline code existing in the faction.
Yeah, so they can't be moved. They can't be a lot of different, like, half obeys don't work that are done by triggers.
It's very hard to get off. Broad range of models, yeah, it's very good.
And Suppress Magic is just another really great ability to have slapped on this guy. So I think this is going to be a model we're going to be seeing incoming a lot in Guild. So that's that. And I guess we'll move on to Orderly, unless you have anything else?
Nope.
All right, Orderlies.
It's another model where it's like, he got buffed, but I don't know if he's all the way to common hiring yet. But he got a lot of improvement. And
yeah, he got a bunch of abilities changed. So I guess I'll just read them out. Research Specimen, Constriction, Restraints were all replaced with Clingy and Medical Personnel. Necrotic Injection action has been changed with the Grapple action, which is his new base action. And he also now has a bonus action, which is Creep Along, which is honestly a really good bonus action.
Oh yeah, especially with Emergency Surgery. It makes Emergency Surgery useful. So that's really cool. I can actually move up to a model that needs healing and heal it twice, which, as a 5-stone model, I think is absolutely the baseline for where you need to be worth taking in that role.
Yeah, and honestly, Research Specimen, Constriction, Restraints were all basically abilities that were utterly useless to have on a 5-stone model that has no real defensive tech besides Hard to Wound. Because it's like, this model's abilities all rely on you being next to a model, but you just die, so,
Yeah, and it didn't fit the Asylum very well either, because he wasn't... You would want your minion to be providing the support of the staggered engine, and he just didn't have that on his card.
He had it as a trigger on his range 0 attack.
Yeah, and now it's range 1, and it's not a trigger, and it doesn't matter if you damage them, it just goes off.
It's a very good ability.
Useful.
His heal's pretty decent. Hold down's great if we see him coming in something like Perdita, or even Sonya is a gun action now, right? Sonya's always been a gun action, I believe.
Yeah, I think so.
So I think this model might be taken. It's a little hard to say that because 5 wounds hard to wound, but cost 5, and he's never considered engaged. So when Sonya gets burning on all these models, he can walk next to them and then just start dropping scheme markers. So that's pretty good to have on a model.
He has enough things going for him. I think you'll definitely see him in more lists. How many? I don't know. It'll depend.
I think it'll be a cute take. Honestly, I think the only way you're seeing this model is in Sonya. It'll be a cute take. They can kind of follow around like the Witchling Thralls, and they can heal them. a little bit while also, dropping scheme markers and doing something else. So, well, we might see it, we might not. I wouldn't be surprised either way.
Yeah, pretty much.
Next on our list, we have Alpinus. This is more of a side
Or
grade than a buff.
It's just a buff. What do you mean side grade?
Because you have to start the walk now within his aura, whereas before you could just move through it. And that is... Honestly, I prefer it the way it's written now, so I would almost count it as a buff with you. But the big change to Alpinus, as I just mentioned, is his aura. Now, when you start within 4 of him, you can move models, terrain, and height, as opposed to before, where if you're just within 4 of him, you get to ignore models, terrains, and height when moving. That made things awkward as hell, because you would walk behind something during your move, and you lose sight of Alpinus, and then you get to lose all this nice stuff.
You couldn't walk through walls, for instance. It was just impossible.
Yeah, you had to, depending on your TO, some would allow you to walk through like a building, but technically, if you ever walked into a building and lost line of sight of him because you're inside a building that's impassable, you can't see him now anymore. And so that was always weird as hell, and there wasn't really like, what do we do with this now? Now he basically just gives him like the super incorporeal, because you get to ignore vertical distance as well, which is really nice.
Yeah, and it fits the faction really well too. Like, this was obviously what this was always meant to kind of work like, but now they just kind of fiddled with the phrasing so that it plays more intuitively. So it's great. It'll see more play than it did.
Yeah, and honestly, this is a model that just was underrated, I think, most of the times, because this aura is one of the most insane things you can ever have. Especially in Explorers that has, besides the Seeker faction, doesn't really have any way to ignore terrain. So, yeah.
And also with Calypso changes we'll get to later.
And Tim Feast is now just a generic heal 2, which is, I think, probably a lot nicer than the 1-2-4 flip. But, you can't have that nice heal 4.
Yeah.
It was 1-2-4.
Oh, was it?
Yeah.
Okay, cool.
But yeah, that's Alpinus, and now we're going to move on to Swinehurst. I don't play Gremlins. What does this model do? Besides beat the hell out of me. And why did it need a buff? Because it already beat the hell out of me.
So the problem that Swinehurst had was that they were kind of a little confused between 2 roles. On the one hand, they're a defense 6 kind of tanky model. They have infused body where they can reduce damage based on glowy. They only had 7 wounds. The only way you could really get glowy for the most part was by taking a damage that you then had to spend more AP healing back. But then they had this thing where they got these triggers that they could build in, and these amazing offensive triggers. So they were kind of these missiles that weren't super tanky, but could do a lot of damage if they got in there. And so being split between those two identities could sometimes leave them in an awkward spot, I think. But now they've really consolidated it as being the tanky frontliner of the Wong keyword. So in combination with some of the changes they made to Wong that we'll get to later. But they just gave it an extra wound, gave it the built-in trigger to gain shielded whenever it heroic interventions and pushes friendly models out of engagement with an enemy. So they're very much consolidated into this kind of frontline interference role, where if someone's trying to dive you, then these are the guys that are going to come in, get your guys out of engagement, tank up, kind of shift your guys around with Frightening Reminder, and then get stuck in with people. So I think they're great. I think consolidating their identity like that was amazing. It lets them play forward into positions where they want to be to enable things like Wong hitting shockwaves off of them or those kinds of things. So this is great. Losing triggers is a little sad, but I think the rest of the compensation is great.
You gain Tear Off a Bite, which I think is pretty huge. Now you have trigger on every suit.
Yeah, but not being able to build in any of them with your glowy is a little
balanced.
But it was a huge buff for Sui, though. Absolutely incredible buff for Sui. So it'll be really exciting to see what they do in that keyword.
All right, nice.
Because for those who are not aware, you have Old Major, you can build in a ram and a positive to damage, which for 2/4/5 damage track means that they're now healing 2 and probably dealing moderate 4 on all their attacks. So Sui could really struggle with low defenses and the ability to survive. Glowy token reduction plus Terrible Bite is just perfect for that.
Yep. Well, there you go. Pigs making a comeback. Let's move on to Neil Henry, a model no one knows exists.
Yeah, Neil Henry was just an absolute mess of card text. He had a confused role. He didn't really fit anywhere. He wasn't that tanky, but he was a frontline model that wanted to punch things, but then he hurt himself punching things. He was kind of anti-construct, but like the anti-construct sub-theme and the Foundry keyword was just a mess of incoherent card text. So they just completely reworked his card. He's a tanky frontline beater. They gave him the defense 6 treatment. He got a little bit of utility. He got some marker removal sub-theming, some healing of friendly models sub-theming.
Marker creation.
Marker creation. He lost all of his text that cared about constructs, and now it's all switched to just being enemy models. Now he's not dropping just schemes. He's just dropping scheme or scrap.
He can't kill his own constructs anymore, though, to get scheme markers. Very depressing.
Yeah, exactly. It's just a great set of changes for him. He's going to actually get higher than Foundry keyword now. So it's great.
I mean, losing Reckless, I think, is decently large, though.
Yeah, it is a thing that it doesn't have. But being defense 6 and having a heal and just other utility text on his card, I think far more than makes up for that.
And yeah, built-in ignore armor instead of needing the suit is massive. Now, especially because Foundry, New Mei Fang, very good at pulsing out that focus, and a 2/4/5 ignoring armor. Ooh boy, that can kill a lot of things.
Yeah, absolutely. So just a much more coherent model that has a defined role instead of things you can do, I think.
All right, onwards to our last little buff, kind of. Moleman, another model no one knew existed.
Yeah, it's crazy that this model gained a wound and a bonus action and another bonus action and an ability and another ability and is now, like, good. This model was so trash before.
Yeah. Yeah,
so,
I mean, it gained, what, literally 2 abilities and, like, 3 actions, kind of.
Something like that, yeah. So it's just a huge mobility tool now. There's been a lot of talk about some things that this can enable in Arcanists, and there's definitely going to be a lot of theory crafting and playing around with this model to see just where he fits, because he really does bring a lot of really potentially transformative tools to the table. And we'll just have to see how that shakes up the faction hiring moving forward.
Yeah.
So just kind of go through what he does is he basically lets your models, he drops a marker that lets any of your models, just as a free bonus action that doesn't even counter to your bonus action, move up to 10 inches up the board as a place. And it's just any size 2 or less model and any friendly beast. So that's just a huge amount of mobility that it can potentially offer up to the crew. One caveat is that he is a 5 wound model, and if he dies, then they don't do anything. So that's always a relevant caveat to how this sort of a thing works.
Yeah, but I mean, hey, you can bring multiple, keep one back to just not die. One sacrifices his life to go forward and drop as many tunnels as he can. And,
yeah, and they support each other. So when you're placing up, you have to place by either a terrain marker or a friendly scheme marker. Before it was locked to a friendly scheme marker, which was incredibly awkward because if you already have a scheme marker, then why are you placing your model up there? What to do what?
Yeah.
Weird. But now it can do terrain. And you can either do terrain already on the board. There isn't actually a huge amount of terrain support in Arcanist. So the most obvious synergy is just using their other bonus action to drop a tunnel marker somewhere. So in Arcanists, at least, you're probably just going to have to take several of these to use it, unless there's some other thing you're doing that happens to generate terrain markers. But in Neverborn Chimera, there's just a huge range of terrain markers that you can play around with.
Yeah, you can hire any of the Titania models, right?
Yeah, you can do that. You can do layer markers. You could do Hungry Land if you want to do, but that's a little awkward.
Yes.
Web markers are a big one that's super easy to use, though. So there's just a huge range of marker generation in Neverborn that these can synergize really nicely with.
Yeah, I think the biggest synergy we'll see in Arcanist is obviously the already pretty good Silent Ones, who will just be making some ice pillars, and then because you can justify hiring Silent Ones in literally any faction ever, or any keyword, I guess, because they're just good range healing / movement denial on opponents, and yeah, they're going to enable the Moleman to start tunneling right away. Just you need the suit for the trigger, so that's a little annoying, but at least they have it as opposed to not having it.
Yeah, and if you don't have the trigger, you can just use your other bonus action, which just makes it and not place forward.
So. Yeah, you have to walk forward. Ooh, scary. All right, well, that's Moleman. I think we'll probably see these guys. Yeah, I find it hard to believe that this insane amount of free movement won't be taken, because worst comes to worst, it's going to be one of the best alphas Arcanists have ever seen, and if you want to know something terrifying, that's Hoffman. Makes pillars, makes pylons on the map already, tunnels to them, you make terrain markers, turn one, you just launch a Peacekeeper all the way fucking forward, have it be fasted, he gets to nom anybody. So,
yeah, pillars, I hadn't thought of those. It's a good call out.
Yeah, I just don't know if tunnel markers are destructible or not. I guess they're not, because they're not mentioned anywhere. Tunnel markers are just tunnel markers. They have no traits.
They're just severe.
Yeah, a severe tunnel marker. So they're not even destructible. Wow. So I think you're going to see this in Hoffman. You're going to move a lot of these models forward. And Hoff 2 is going to be able to utilize the hell out of this. I guess Peacekeeper can't do it because he's height 3. So you're going to have to do it with the height 2 model. So it'll be like Josh. So you'll get some nice irreducible... He's a really slow model. So, it really helps him out, get up the board. And you'll be next to a pylon, which is where you want to be anyways. So...
Yeah, and it's kind of out of activation movement, but they actually get to wait until their own activation to pull the trigger on it. And that's...
So they get to do it last activation. So in order to do it turn 1, you will have to bring 2 Molemen, because you're going to need one.
Not if you have pylons. I just use the dig deep, drop a severe next to it, and that's all you need.
Well, you need the first tunnel in your base, right? You don't just make you got to get 2 tunnel markers out. You can only get 1 out per turn with these guys.
No, the terrain marker would be the pylon, right?
Yeah.
That you move forward to. Are you saying if you want to do 2 teleports?
Well, in order to teleport your friendly model that's not a Moleman. You get what I'm saying? Because they get to do it with the Through the Mountain ability. And they need to be able to... Oh, right. Right. I'm just being delusional. I, for some reason, actually was thinking you needed to link the tunnels up, but nope, I'm just being stupid. Never mind. Scratch everything I just said. You're right, they just get to decide to, they just get to have the tunnel marker drop next to them, and then on their turn, they just get to warp 8 inches forward, a little bit more, because you're placing a whole 1 inch beyond a 30 mil, and then their own base. So you get a nice solid, 12-ish, 11-ish inches of movement.
Lots of inches, yep.
Yeah. All right. That's going to be pretty good. I'm not looking forward to it. It's definitely going to be higher than Hoffman. I'm calling it right here. All right. Yeah. Next, we're going to move on to reworks for game quality of life / keyword locking. And the big one we're going to be starting with is Just Like You is basically gone. Terracotta Warriors.
Yeah, this is a model that either was being abused for janky combo
Make a
or
bazillion pass
wasn't in
markers.
a list. Yeah, so copying abilities is always just a super awkward thing to have in your game design space, and so they're just moving away from that
And
at this point.
copying Master's abilities was always the most
Yeah.
broken thing to do. Yeah,
Yep.
so quickly, they lost Armor 1 and Ruthless. They gained the 10,000 Strong ability. They gained Take the Hit. They gained Numbskull, and they gained Nefarious Pact, all of which I think are worth it. Our good friend Pope Darpa doesn't really like it. He's very sad to see these models gone. He thinks they're just going to be models that die way too easily. I kind of disagree.
Yeah.
I think he's a little
10,000
too...
strong.
I think he's a little too sad that he lost his Passmaker generators. But I think 10,000 strong is going to be really good on a take the hit model that draws you a card at the end of every activation.
I think, like, in the case where you're against ping damage specifically, 10,000 strong is a little bit worse than what they were before. But you know what it is most of the time? Just super hard to kill.
Yeah, it's
and that's really good.
It's basically 2 hits that are just completely ignored, right? And that's just going to be super strong. I can't get over like how good that could be with take the hit. Just passing off any 2 attacks you want.
I think they compare favorably to Soulstone miners. I think drawing a card is reasonably comparable to mining a Soulstone, and these guys just do that every time they're on every turn that they're on the table. It is at the end of the activation, so it's a little awkward if you're trying to multiple the other. You lose that card that turn, but like if you're doing that, then it probably gets you points and it's good. So,
and his attack's a real attack now too.
Yeah, I think they're a model that's just like fine, and sometimes you have extra stones and put them in your list, and sometimes it stops an alpha in its tracks. So, good model, would hire.
Yeah, I almost wish that they could stone for the mold the other, but that'd be just way too broken. But I mean, that was Lana's biggest complaint is this is a model I can't heal. Why do I care that it can only take a couple hits? And I think the answer to that is, well, sometimes you're just going to have a mask and you're just going to be able to mold the other into something better.
And then you can heal 4 stones. How often are you putting Killing Sport into your 4-stone model?
Yeah. I will say the Nefarious Pact kind of just counters out the take the hit a little bit, but obviously canceling a whole hit is normally, as you were comparing with the Soulstone Miner, that's a bit better than, preventing damage with the Soulstone. So definitely is the defensive option of kind of a miner at a lower cost, and the only downside is it can't move up the board like a miner. So we'll see. Yeah. I think this is going to be take and play actually a decent amount. I might be wrong on that one, but I find it a little hard not to justify just 4 Soulstones to have a model will follow your like really important master around to make sure he doesn't die.
And provide you a little bit of card support so they are card neutral.
Yeah. Solid
model. We'll see play sometimes. We'll see how much.
And the other model that lost just like you is Changeling. This model just did stupid things in Neverborn. It could do hilarious drawing of cards in Titania 2. It was really good for Nekoma 2 to proc some of her abilities. And now it's just gone from the versatile memory of Neverborn.
Yeah. This model's role was basically just completely reworked. It's much more similar to a Wicked Doll that just has 5 defensive abilities tacked onto it. So, the ability to activate and place to something 12 inches away is just a huge amount of scheming versatility. The fact that it has that plus a bonus action to move, like there are so many schemes that strategies that this just scores so efficiently for 4 stones. It's incredibly hard to deal with. It has disguise, so it's hard to charge into. It has stealth, so it can be taken out in range, especially when it's placing 12 inches. It's just a really difficult model to get to grips with. And then if you're holding it for last, it just has manipulative the entire turn. Like all of its defensive abilities just really come together with the way that this model was reworked. I think that's pretty cool.
Yeah, I I obviously think that most of the use of this model is gone, but obviously it's going to be better in Mimic. I will say the only huge
Yeah.
downside is Sidekick. Like, Lucius 2 will probably be more than 12 inches away, so I doubt Sidekick's working much there. Lucius 1, I think that's going to be more where you see it, especially because the other WoW models are not really taken, the Henchman and Enforcer level of WoW models. Or, I don't know why I said WoW,
Um,
Mimic.
Doppelganger, I think, is a
Yeah,
model that it's a
Doppelganger,
good friend with, and Agent
but
obvious
Klaus
has
is
obvious
gone,
connections with it.
kind of, because of his changes. And
I think
then
Klaus is interesting actually because Klaus is a model that wanted to be kind of midfield, and besides its abusive combo stuff,
yeah,
all of its abilities kind of wanted to be kind of midfield and within about 6 inches of enemy models. And there could be some uses where that just is an option for you to score points with. So I don't know. Um, it has abilities which are clearly quite strong. It will be interesting if those come together with the rest of the keyword. Um, and we'll just have to see as time goes on how that works out.
yeah. I think that's exactly how to think of it. I don't. This is one model where I'm not going to be like. I think it's gone because obviously Sidekick, as we know from By Your Side, is really good, but it's a much more contained version of By Your Side. Um, but it also has, out of all the By Your Side models, it is by and far the best survivability of any of those. So we'll say 4 Soulstones for a super survivable model that can teleport is pretty good. Honestly, it's not even terrible to just hold your ancient packs on, kind of play off to the side, and
Yeah.
then eventually just late game throw in the sidekick. Know you're probably going to die going in, but be fine with it because you've done everything you wanted to do.
Yeah. And the other thing with this model is that it has disguised. So does Doppelganger. Take by the hand is a really good tech to have with disguised models. They've charged into your model, they've engaged you. You just teleport one of these up, take by the hand your model out of engagement, go do whatever thing, score you points, and now they have to walk up to it again if they want to re-engage it. So with the frequency that disguised exists with this model, makes that kind of just small little out of activation movements just that much stronger.
Yeah. Yeah. It's going to be interesting for sure. On the wrong side, I think, is a pretty decent ability to have on this model. Um, yeah, we're going to see. I like it. It seems decent, but it's obviously it's not as good
Yeah.
as the old Changeling was for just how versatile and game breakingly stupid it can be sometimes.
It's one of those things where it really expands what it does inside of its keyword and shuts down all of the random little out of keyword uses you were seeing for it,
Yep.
which is kind of the theme for all of these.
Yeah, as a M2E player, I don't care too much about staying in keyword, but I know a lot of people really love that in M3E, and they really prefer to stay in keyword, and a lot of people are keyword gamers, and now now they're really emphasizing that more and more. I think that they really want M3E to be keyword based for sure. So with that being said, I think we'll move on to our next model, the Blackblood Shaman. Very similar kind of changes ish, not really.
This model got reworked a lot actually to bring it back into just being a keyword thing. Um, some of the ways that they did it are interesting, but it's very much they're really trying to emphasize growing up terror tots, because I think that's the only size one that exists in Nephilim. But you cannot grow Blackblood Shaman up into anything anymore, and that's big.
Yeah.
Um, so that's completely gone, and it's completely gone that they pass out focus to non-Nephilim. And you can't take two of them and pass out focus twice to Nephilim. This model got taken down like 3 notches and completely keyword locked. And they had seen way too much out of activation or out of keyword Blackblood Shaman apparently. This model just got destroyed. It was absolutely, it will never see, well, I won't say never, but essentially never see play out at this point.
Yeah, I think what we will see is people maybe hiring Terratots now, and making like just a decent amount of youngs. But I don't know.
Nephilim are good models, but you can't even pass focus to non-Nephilims. It's so janky and so risky to go that route, I think.
Right, but Nekma 2, I don't think cares about that. Like, if you just hire...
absolutely. Nekma 2 will play these models.
Oh, yeah, for sure. Like, because they by themselves full grow a Terratot into a young.
No, because once per turn, each model can only be affected once per turn by Ancient Ritual from any Blackblood Shaman. So you can't pass 2 grow tokens to a single a Terratot in a turn with just Blackbloods.
Oh, because the grow... Oh, right. I was thinking that they still had the remove corpse marker, gain a grow token, but that wouldn't even make sense because that'd be on themselves. Yeah. No, you're... Okay. Yeah, I don't know.
It's a lot. They got hit a lot.
Yeah, they got changed and whacked a lot, but I mean, to be honest, it was kind of expected. I don't think being able to pulse focus 2 out to a whole crew ever should really be a thing.
The other weird thing...
I guess Rezzers can still do it. I don't know.
Blood Sacrifice makes a corpse, but then Ancient Ritual only goes off after a movement. So you'd have to knife something, drop the corpse, and then also take another movement that then ends in base with the corpse marker to then have this go off. It's just a bunch of really awkward interactions that happen now.
Yeah, it's gonna be a lot of theory crafting on what the new Nekoma lists are going to look like in order to get these to go off, and if they're able to do it effectively enough to justify hiring them.
Yeah, I think the play is like you generate the corpse before they go, then you charge something, use that corpse, and then make another one for something to chain into later in the turn, which is fine. I think Nekma 2 has tools that make that work efficiently enough of the time, but it's just a little awkward. They're fine. They'll probably see play sometimes. But yeah.
Yeah. I'm excited to see what they do with them. But yeah, enough of them. Onwards for our next one. Cryptologists. These models are dead to me. Basically what they decided is they are a Wastrel only model, which fine, whatever. Antique Timepiece now, the big change is Antique Timepiece now only affects a friendly Wastrel or minion, and the bonus action has to be a bonus action listed on the attached artifact upgrade. It doesn't do the whole start of activation stuff anymore. Which is going to be pretty nice. You're going to be able to hand off the upgrade, gain fast on other models with them. They have rapid reaction now, so their full stool gets a tome built in, so they're going to have guaranteed condition removal if you're willing to take some damage. And more likely, you're going to be dropping scrap marker with them now with throw your arm at him trigger.
Purification is a nice trigger to have access to. Just guaranteed condition removal can be quite nice.
Yeah, it's not a decent damage, though. 235. It's kind of scary.
I don't have enough familiarity with the Wastrel keyword to know if they have armor 1 and everything that would make that a little more palatable. But
they have regen, obviously, with the mask upgrade. I don't remember which upgrade. One of the upgrades kind of heals them. Yeah. So,
they have some little utility, but I think the main thing that's attractive here is that they'll probably reliably draw you a card because of where they can stand and still be useful, and they'll give you a little bit more flexibility with how you pass your upgrades around the crew and time gaining fast with them. So maybe that's enough that they see play, but
I'm leaning towards no. I'm just leaning towards no. I think they got hit way too hard. They only ever saw play in Nexus with their ability to create a second Berserk Husk.
Yeah, you say nerfed, but I think they got buffed for their keyword use.
I mean, sure, but even then, like, a few of their things was nice to have. I mean, obviously, plus stat on their ranged attack is pretty nice, because it's a pretty good attack, 133 blast on everything, range 8, but I don't know. It's not. It's range 8. They're move 4. They want to be next to models for the ancient technology, but they're again move 4.
Yeah, they're pretty awkward.
They're really awkward. So I don't think these models are being hired. They weren't hired before. I don't think they justify 6 soul stones of cost just by being able to more effectively move around the upgrades, especially because a lot of those upgrades are going to be all the way up the board, and even walk twice, 16 inches is normally pretty good, but line of sight blockers, movement normally isn't a straight line. It's really going to be map dependent.
No TN, which is nice. So
yeah.
That helps it a lot, but
if you ever need more scrap marker generation and thunders, that'll be nice. I don't think Explorers cares about scrap marker generation anymore now that Beeb Calypso are kind of gone, but we'll get to that later. But overall, I don't think Explorers care about scrap marker generation anymore. So even that niche part is kind of just gone.
The guaranteed range scrap marker generation is pretty cool if you really need that in your BB engine, I guess. But
yeah, but that's just not a thing anymore. But we'll talk about that a little bit more later. I think that's all really to say about Cryptologists. Yeah, I think they were a super niche model as basically being Nexus keyword only previously. Now I think they're just a model that no one hires, but maybe Wastrel will prove me wrong. But it'll only ever be Wastrel that hires, I'm pretty sure.
Yeah.
Unless Explorers all of a sudden massively need scrap marker generation, but at the moment, they don't really need that. So, onwards to our next model, we have Francois.
This was an interesting one.
Was it?
Yeah, so Francois was the best model frontliner in
the game.
Bayou, and it wasn't really close. He was defense 6, willpowered 6, armor 1. Effectively, he had 3/4/5 crit strike sword at stat 7. With flurry, he had ambush to move him up the board. He just kind of did everything. Oh, and he had a stacked 6 gun that was just 2/4/5, and sometimes did a bonus damage as well. Just incredibly flexible, incredibly resilient. Just a really great tool across the board. And now he still does all of those things. And he's still great. And I'm not really even joking. He got modified.
He got hit pretty hard, I think. I mean, losing hard to kill obviously is massive.
Oh, never mind. He's dead. Sorry, I actually missed it. He lost hard to kill.
Oh, okay. Sorry.
That's so big.
Yes, losing hard to kill is huge. He lost his built-in crit strike and now only gets it once per turn. He no longer has any of his plus flips, which was basically always. I mean, if it was, I don't know. I would always try to not give it to him, but good lord, it's pretty hard to deny his plus flips, especially in melee range.
The thing he gained, though, is he gained built-in wild shot on his gun, and it's not nothing.
He also gained challenge.
Enough. Yeah, he gained challenge, and he gained a use case where he can sometimes just set it up so that he effectively just has Serene Countenance. Which
he always had wild shot on his gun, by the way. Oh, you're saying he gets a guaranteed trigger. Got it.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, that is a little nice, I guess. Sudden Strike on Gremlin Menace is not terrible. It means that you can actually take this action now instead of just being like, why would I ever do this? I would rather just whack him with my sword again.
Yeah, exactly. Especially without a keyword use, Gremlin Menace was just a dead ability on his card. So, yeah, he definitely, his ceiling went down a good bit. But I think he gained some consistency and flexibility, which I think is a cool direction to take the model. And this is probably less relevant now, but Wild Shot is an amazing Bakor activator. Not that that's super relevant anymore, but that is a piece of synergy that's cool to have, is just Francois activating any of your Whizbang models.
Yeah, I think the most likely thing we're going to be seeing, though, is the Ram used on challenge. Because I think that's, I mean, obviously it's his best defensive tech.
But it doesn't always need defensive tech, is the thing.
That's true.
Sometimes you just ambush, walk, and shoot something with your wild shot. And if you give him Ruthless, I think he has some really cool play patterns where you're just like taking a walk, shooting something with focus, maybe ambushing, and then just doing that until something comes into a different spacing that makes your other actions better. So I think that play pattern got better for him.
Yeah, and Gremlin Menace ignoring other models is also like very important because it was such.
Sure.
I don't think I've ever seen anyone take that ability on this model. I still don't know if we're going to see anyone take it, but it's definitely much nicer now that it has Sudden Strike on it. So we'll see.
The other. No, never mind. Yeah, it'll, rework model probably worse, but has more play patterns that are viable.
All right. And now we're going to get to the models that were really actually hit, because this is kind of the closest we've gotten to like a heavy nerf. A lot of them have been upgrades or side grades. Now we're looking at the models that were just, these models might not, no, they're definitely seeing play, because the next one we're going to talk about is Fuhatsu. So I don't want to say they're not going to see play. This model's still going to see play. It is now a henchman.
Not a henchman.
Yeah, sorry. It is now not a henchman, which is huge. It's as people probably know, Pope Darpa, our Resident 10 Thunders player, he couldn't make it because he's doing nerd things like D&D right now. But we'll probably, I assume, is probably going to talk about this more in Schemes and Stones podcast. This has been the nerf he's always been talking about for Fuhatsu. As long as he's not a henchman, you can't be stoning around a lot of different things, but most importantly, you can't be getting that sweet Mint 4. Which is huge. Yeah. I will have to say that there are other nerfs that make him kind of more meh. So he just doesn't have scatter anymore. And that's probably the biggest change, actually, more so than the Enforcer Henchman nerf. I actually, and I think I've talked about this with Landon, Rapid Fire is not like as huge as of a change because most of the time your resources was gone by the time you're using the last Rapid Fire. So it's kind of like you're just trying to get lucky and hit. Either that or...
play pattern that was incredibly relevant with Fuhatsu was that he has 2 focus, but you can't engage him because you get scattered and shot twice at focus anyway.
Right. And now he can't do that.
Play pattern is dead.
Exactly.
And that was the thing that made him really almost impossible to deal with, was that was always the thing that is normally how you would deal with a gun turret like this, and he just invalidated that line.
Yeah, and I think it's pretty important to note that playstyle is just not how you play Fuhatsu now anymore, and that's fine. Like, you're going to be seeing this in other situations now instead of just being able to focus, push him forward as recklessly as you were before in order to take those shots last activation. And then when he gets engaged because you threw him halfway up the board, he can still just push people away and shoot a couple more times. That you're right. That play style is now just gone. Like, it's just not going to be a thing. And in order to make up for that, he now is only cost 8, which is a pretty nice addition, I think. And he also gained a reckless aim trigger on his gun, which is built in. Which is really nice.
Aim is a new trigger, which is once per turn, and after resolving, if the section failed, draw a card. So it's this really cool trigger where, for one thing, it fights with critical strike. So you're not just always declaring critical strike if you hit it. Sometimes you're going to actually have to make a decision about, do you want to declare reckless aim on this or on the next one?
No.
Once per turn.
You only ever take reckless aim when your action failed. So you would never... Yeah, they never compete
you declare it before...
After resolving if the action failed.
Yeah,
you know when declaring triggers that your action has failed.
So you always have the option if they cheat if you declare reckless aim. Anyway, it's once per turn. Sometimes it draws you a resource if it fails, but regardless of what happens, either you hit them and you gain value, or you reckless aim and you gain value. So it's a nice kind of moderation of the success and fail cases there.
Well, yeah. Now you just don't have crit strike ever guaranteed, so you need the card for crit strike, and that's pretty massive.
Yep.
So I think honestly we're actually going to be seeing a lot more stones for like Sweeping Strike maybe.
Well, against stone, so.
Yeah, never mind. I don't know. This model is fine. It's a fine model for 8 costs. A unit 12 range stat
is
6.
the thing we haven't talked about yet.
Yeah.
And that's the thing that they added the Gatling Gunner as well, and it's also the same kind of a thing where no matter what happens, you're potentially gaining value. Either you hit, you gain value, or you miss, you gain value. But it just makes it a much more reliable and less swingy model, and that's probably a better spot for this to be in.
Yeah, so it's gonna be it's probably gonna be taken to more crews now, because it's not just gonna be the focus shove up the board crews, which was pretty much just Shenlong, maybe Mizaki, who could charge it up the board. So I think we'll be seeing this in more 10 Thunders crews, honestly, than we were before. At 8 costs, it's just a very solid model. Its only real big downside now is you engage it, it's engaged. You have 2-inch engagement range. This is a very sad model.
Yeah, the other thing is it just dies to Min 3 now. If that,
yes.
Min 3 armor piercing. So things like Mad Dog has a really bad time against now. Unless you have other protective tech for it, obviously. But it's no just, I can be almost certain of surviving it. You have to be a little more careful.
Yeah, still that armor 1 hardened wounds, so it's not going to be the easiest to take down, but, you know, it's not the monstrosity it was before. And I think it's going to be a lot easier for players to play against than before, but they're still going to have to play against it, for sure, probably.
Yeah.
All right, moving on to a lot more significant nerfs that I think literally kills the models. Brock Inspector. I don't see myself ever taking this model really much at all anymore. It was already a model you didn't hire, but I guess we're going to talk about the changes. The one that really makes it matter is the Hallowed Glory. No longer just does 2 damage to anybody you're in base contact with. They do actually need to fail the duel and be in base contact with you in order to take the damage.
Yeah. Kind of on the theme here, getting rid of some of the most obnoxious, uninteractive stuff that people had been experiencing in Explorers, and this is one of them. You summon a Brock Inspector, maybe they already activated, you just activate it, hit a TN twice, and just did a bunch of damage, and they still have a Brocken to deal with in their face.
Yeah. I definitely think that needed to be changed. I'm not a person who ever thought that this should be on the model. My biggest problem is I kind of wish they just made it that if you failed the duel, you got pushed 2 and 2 damage, and they didn't still keep the whole into base contact thing. That was always the change I kind of had in mind. Maybe lower the range on it to like range 3 or something like that. But I don't know. It's whatever. The second big change, and the reason I think it really is kind of gone, is it lost Terrifying. So Terrifying 11, you can argue it never came up much anyways, but it really does. A lot of small models couldn't hit it before, because if they just had bad willpower, they'd just be failing willpower duels and wasting activation, so you just wouldn't see it attacked a lot, especially if they had no hand. It's like, oh, he is Terrifying, I'm not risking losing my AP. I'd rather attack somebody else.
The big thing is that Deva just is the model that gains immediate value now.
And I already picked the Deva a lot instead of the Brocken, to be honest, because it technically represents more damage than the Brocken already did. And
assuming Irreducible wasn't relevant.
Yeah. And I think now we're going to see Brocken taken purely for the Irreducible. So whenever Irreducible is relevant, you'll see Ivan maybe summon the Brocken. And that's pretty much going to be it. And that might be even an Ivan 2 thing more so, because he can...
And Withering Away. That card text against some crews is incredibly significant.
Yeah, that's true. Withering Away 2 will always be good. So I'm pretty doom and gloom about it, because I didn't really even like this model much at all to begin with. It was a model I would never hire, period. It's only one you would ever summon. And now Deva is just the more consistently good one. In my mind, but there's definitely going to be niche quiches where Brock can still take it, and Brocken's now just not the monster he was before. So,
Yeah. It became more niche, more tech. It's fine. It's a summoner.
Yeah, that's the argument. It's a summoner. It's fine. The only problem I have is I almost wish they would just like change Brocken like almost wholly, because like they did a couple of the other models, because I really feel like Umbra as a keyword is just like the worst keyword maybe in the game for hiring models, and the only thing that justifies these models existing at the cost they exist at is the fact that they're not meant to be hired, they're meant to be summoned. And I don't know if that's a great spot, but that's where I feel like the whole Umbra keyword really rests on. But we'll see. The changes made sense. They could not leave Hallowed Glory the way it was. It makes sense. So I think that's pretty much all we can say about Brocken. We're going to talk about Ivan a bit more, so I'll wait to say those things until we talk about Ivan. Our next up is going to be Calypso.
Oh my god, I hated this model so much, but I honestly think they might have gone too far.
I think most people think
this model got hit like 5 different ways.
More than that. Oh, nope, actually exactly 5. So let's just list them off. Demise down to 1 from 2. Massive Tentacles trigger removed from Thriller Driller. Onward stat is increased to needing a 9. Defense stat went down to 5. And Original Creator is replaced with Original Creators. Now needing Maxine in order to get that reduced cost of the hiring the package. So
yeah,
that's the
cost
change.
Increased by 2, defense reduced by 1. It's 3rd AP, significant increase in the TN, and the unresisted damage and movement ability is gone.
Yeah,
like those were like the 3 things that were going for it, and they just kneecapped it in all of those ways.
Yeah, so pretty much, this was the model. This was actually, I think, Explorer's really only good answer into incorporeal models. Gone. I mean, there's some other things, but realistic, this was the main thing, obviously, because just how efficient it was as a package. Original Creators has made this so that it will never be hired as a package outside of EVS, I don't think. Maybe someone will try to prove me wrong on that one, but I'll stand by it. I don't think this is ever being hired outside of EVS as a package. The Demise, I don't think that really matters. The -1 stat, even the -1 stat, I'm not even sure how much I care about that either.
I think the -1 stat is actually really critical.
It's pretty large for sure because of how weak he is, but
well, defense 5 means that stat 6 models can favorably trade cards with you and can consistently land 3 attacks into it, which is very often what you need to do to be able to deal with it effectively. I mean, it depends on card parity, but the range of hand differences where you can actually reliably deal with Calypso expands massively just with a 1 stat change. I think that's huge. I think that and say removing Massive Tentacles, just those 2, this model would have been perfectly fine.
Yeah, the main reason I like the defense, I mean, obviously this is actually going to hurt EVS a lot more, is because, in my mind, because the 1 stat really helps with the deep discovery shenanigans in EVS, and now that the only time you're ever hiring this outside of EVS, you're never going to have that ability on Calypso anymore. It doesn't matter as much. I mean, that's the reason the onward stat nerf is actually like massively large, because with B no longer piloting it outside of EVS, you really lost 2 stats on this, and that's huge. Like I don't know. I mean, obviously,
you need a tome onward with this guy now, basically.
Yeah, there are some funny things. The reason why I'm not writing Calypso outside of being hired of EVS by himself is because there are some funny things to do with, for example, Nexus Kids, 4 AP models on Nexus Kids now, because they had no bonus action before, and they can just ride up with Calypso. You also had Jin Bakura as the new Umbra model, who's really good. We're going to be seeing him a lot, and the funny thing Calypso can do is rebury Jin, so that he can start taking buried actions again, and then unbury somewhere else and put a minion back in the back line. So I don't want to write Calypso out because those are still a couple cute things you can do with him that are decently viable, and overall, he's still fine with just taking mining tools, but he's obviously not the monster he was before.
Yeah.
And the package is dead.
So, obviously, Explorers has a big range of other schemer models, and we're going to have to see Explorer players start adapting to when it's correct to hire those in. So
what?
It'll be interesting to see.
I don't know if that was sarcastic or not, because my big thing is constantly telling people that Explorers, in fact, suck at scheming and strats, and losing Beeb Calypso, I think, is going to show that a lot. And maybe I'm wrong. Maybe there are these secret models before that were good, and we just didn't see them because you had Beeb Calypso. I just don't think that's true, because I recently have been trying to play without Beeb Calypso in personal games. And even just because I don't have space for him in some of the crews that I'm playing where you're allowed to hire dual masters, I just don't hire him because I don't have space. And there really is no other models in Explorers that really can do this that are keywords. Yeah, they just don't exist. The birds are the best examples.
Oster and Twiggy.
Vernon and Wells is the worst model, period, ever.
Are probably the biggest substitutes, but they all cover slightly different areas what you'd want the model to do. They're not as flexible, they're not as resilient necessarily, so makes you have to play around them a lot differently to get your points.
It's not even hard to play around them. Vernon and Wells can't move over terrain, can't leave engagement range, really can't do anything. At least, and that's the big thing Calypso lost, is he can't get out of engagement range either anymore, which is one of the reasons he's going to be terrible at that job as well. And Twiggy is the best example of a model I think we might see more of, because dropping scheme markers from range is good, and so is forcing your opponent to deploy a model first. But
anyway,
I could talk. That's almost like a whole different podcast to talk about the changes to Explorers and where I think they are now. And we'll get into that later with other nerfs, because do we have more Explorers nerfs. Mikhail.
Isn't a 2-inch reach model anymore.
This model's dead to me.
This model got just taken out behind the woodshed. I don't know.
And it wasn't even a model people hired.
Except there were some really abusive shenanigans you could pull with its place effect and its 2-inch reach, where you could kind of make it so that sometimes they just didn't get to do anything.
But even then, not really, because they still obviously 2-inch reach is good, and place effects are nice, but it was so niche because they needed to heal. I don't know.
This with Emissary could lead to some situations where the opponent just felt like they didn't get to do anything.
Yeah, but
inaccurate.
We'll see in a little bit why that's also out of the way anyways.
Yeah, they touched all of the things that were a problem in 3 different ways, which, again, maybe too many things at once. Whatever. I hate Explorers, so I'm not super sad, but
I think I will say that's why I think that the Explorers got bad touch, because they also weren't like a top placing team faction. So it's interesting to see all these bad touches, like a lot of them, on a faction that was placing near the top but wasn't the top. So you can kind of justify a lot of it, because obviously Beeb Calypso was way too strong. Brocken didn't need that. There were other ways around it, but they weren't at that level where it's like you saw them always. They were broken. Top players always played them because it was guaranteed win in tournaments.
Yeah, and I don't think it was a power level thing. It was the way that the abilities interacted with the way the rest of the game worked that led to really negative experiences.
Yeah, which to me feels like they should have That's why I was kind of feeling bad about the Brockens, because obviously they're really strong, but I don't think they were necessarily breaking anything. They should have just been changed to be strong in a different way that is more play-aroundable. They just didn't. They didn't make any like side grades in Explorers. All the Explorers were just straight nerfs pretty much instead of side grades. But
to summarize, his blade is reach 1, which nerfs his Caught in the Ring ability a lot. And then he used to have this ability, Chronicle of Protection, where he could just kind of leap insanely quickly on the board. It just doesn't get a place anymore. It's a push instead.
It's a move.
So
It's a much better than a push.
Sorry, it's a move. So it does similar things, but a lot of the stuff where it's like, oh, I place on the opposite side of this model, and now I'm engaging it too, and now you can't take any actions because all of your actions are illegal, so get screwed scrub. That's gone.
Yeah. Which is why I feel like weird that they hit both that and the range 2. You think it'd be one or the other.
Yeah. And then My Father's Legacy, it used to be just a tactical unresisted lure on enemy models. Now it's not enemy models, it's just a friendly only.
Yeah.
So, like, all of the unique things he brought to the table are gone, and now he's just like a beater. They increased his move stat though, right?
Yeah.
He moved 4, now he's moved 5.
Yeah.
So
that's
which
nice.
he needed with losing that mobility on his Chronicle.
And they cut them down to Sudden Strike. They literally, it's an ability that does the exact same thing, just it needs a ram now instead of a mass, so...
I don't know what that's about.
Don't know what that's about. But he can't get focus to him. He can't... Wait, how did they change My Father's Legacy? Oh, it's other friendly model, so he can't target himself with it, which is what you do before.
Oh, that's right.
Because you would target yourself to gain focus 1, and then you would cheat the ability.
Okay, that's what it was. Okay, yeah. So it's never mind. It is still an unresisted move, but it's pretty restricted. It's fine. He's not reach 2.
It's so weird because you have to target another friendly models, but you're only moving models engaged by this model. It's just a weird ability now.
No, engaging the target 4 inches towards this model.
Okay.
So you strip,
right. It's still the target.
It's reverse heroic intervention.
Yeah, it's still just weird. But, all right. That's McHale.
Fine. They got rid of his abusive stuff, but he's B tier model.
Yeah, and he already was before, so you're still probably just not going to see this model. Not even in
outside of Seeker.
No, I don't think Seeker hires him. Seeker never even hired him that much in the first place. But I guess with Archivist and Beeb Calypso gone, he would have seen a resurgence, but with this nerf on top of it, I don't know. We'll see.
Yeah.
I mean, his attack is still really good, so we'll see.
Yep, it's a beater in a faction that lacks beaters, so that counts for something.
Yeah.
Archivist.
This model's gone.
All the really abusive stuff that it did got taken off. Added a little bit of keyword support. It still draws you cards. It still lets you ignore hard to kill and demise, but it doesn't just get to do range 10, 3, 4, 5 guaranteed and leap around the board. So this model's going to be a lot more focused on its utility that it offers and less just brought because it's a 10 stone model that costs 8 stones. So
they successfully made this model Archivist Cadmus only. Maybe very situationally we'll see this hired to get the hard killer demise. My only real example of thinking this is this still on a severe kills a Jackalope if you're playing against Marcus, but other than that, probably not.
Relevant too, because Jackalope has bad willpower.
Yeah. It's been my go-to to kill Jackalopes forever.
It's a tech piece, and now it's not a tech piece that is just going to happen to be in a crew because it's good anyway.
Yeah, so it doesn't have a plan for it. Neverborn, Ill Omen Supremacy reigns supreme. Explorers are now going to get to be sad about that. It is nice to just make a web marker at the start of activation. I will say that. So I think one of the problems with, for example, Nexus Kids, which is Nexus 2, was when you're hiring Meredith, you didn't feel great because there weren't a good way to get web markers, especially like up range, without whacking your own guys with Archivist, and that always felt bad to need to do that because it's wasting your AP. Although it does draw you a card, it's still kind of like this middle ground where you want to kill people. Especially in Nexus 2, where you can get the whole crew up the board, so you can actually, attack people with Archivist instead of attacking your allies. And this is going to be really nice to make it 8 inches upwards.
Gaining Hushed is a nice buff for the keyword specifically, I think.
Yeah, it's definitely a very nice buff. I think having a trigger other than killer late fees is going to be nice. Obviously, this is going to be a little bit more survivable because it's not killing your crew to always declare killer late fees. I say that it's a good thing. It's not. The killer late fees was great. But, You can think of it that way. You now are incentivized not to kill yourself as much.
Yeah, but as I've said elsewhere, not having an incentive to do a thing that was valuable enough you're willing to do the thing is not a point in a model's favor.
Yeah, the big problem is this is another nerf to Nexus 1, and we'll get to that because Nexus 1, oh god, Nexus 1, I'm so sad, is you can't make multiple web markers, so you only get the one, you can't make two, and that's a pretty... It's not as relevant anymore now that Cryptologist doesn't work. Yeah. But
exactly.
it's still kind of a thing you wanted, because you honestly did want to probably attack two models still in Nexus 1, and use him to create the markers for Eyes and Ears / Berserkos, because you need cards out the wazoo. But you need less cards now because the crew's worse. But we'll get to that. So that's pretty much Archivist. It's a Cadmus model. We're going to see it particularly, I think, in Cadmus 2 a lot. Cadmus 1, it's just okay. Deafening Silence is still really good against a lot of people when in keyword. And so, yeah, it's whatever. People were clamoring for it. I kind of expected to see a reduce in cost with all the things taken off of them, but... I
think it's a perfectly fair 8-stone model now.
I think it's going to be rare, much rarer to see this, but we'll see.
Definitely, you'll be taken much less often.
I'm just talking about in Cadmus as well in particular, because I don't see he has a place in Cadmus 1 anymore.
I think that he plays into the play style that Cadmus 1 will have to play into if it sees any table time well enough that if you see Cadmus 1,
which
you'll
it won't.
probably see Archivist.
But we'll get to that later. Our next up are going to be both of the Intrepids. I'm just going to show one because they got the exact same nerf, which is Aura of Courage. Now only works against enemy model duels.
Generated by an enemy model specifically. Yes. So that's huge. This was one of the more abusive auras that you could just kind of get so much healing off of without having to interact with your opponent, without having to take any real risks. It was abusive in some crews, and they removed that for a reason.
So I'll talk a little on this model because I was the biggest proponent of not hiring this model in Explorers. I never really liked this model. I didn't think it was... I honestly didn't think it was a good model for basically most crews. Mostly because I never liked Aura of Courage as much as people like, because you can talk about how abusive it is, and for people playing against it, I definitely feel like it was abusive, in the sense that, like most of the nerfs I think we're seeing in Explorers, where it was abusive situationally, and everyone remembers the situations where it got abused, because most of those were RNG situations, and it's just like, oh man, it's a definite feels bad, and it's one you remember. Because sometimes you're playing against an Explorer's crew, they have Aura of Courage up, you attack like 5 times, and they just heal 5 times. And that's not like statistically what's going to happen. And it's going to feel, you're not going to get a lot of heals most of the time, but god damn does it feel bad when you just watch your opponent's crew heal up like that. And
there's some Nexus builds too where being able to just heal all of those pings you were taking just for doing TNs that you were flipping it anyway could really support that cruise.
Yeah, but I those
no,
were,
you didn't play that build as much, but
because
I think that is
it wasn't a good build.
To the build that is now being forced.
Right, but, and this is why I really hate that build currently, is because this got nerfed as well. So, I mean, that build just, like, everything about the elite, I'll call it the elite Cadmus build, is just worse now. I mean, the only one who remained the same is Toro. I'm actually shocked Toro remained the same. Because I know a lot of people hated that model as well, but I think you just saw such a decline in play of him because he just didn't work in the current keywords that are really good. That he just doesn't have this hate that a lot of these other models have. But I never liked the unreliability of Aura of Courage. And if that's your main reason for taking it, and that's most people's main reason for taking it, I don't like it at all. The reason I would ever hire Intrepid Emissary was situations, particularly mostly just Jedza, where The healing is nice for gaining life tokens, and I would actually cheat cards for it, unlike almost every other time I have the aura up. As well as very frail model, you have to protect. It's defense 7, take the hit. And Phalanx is pretty nice.
One of the things that still is really obnoxious, but having every other piece of his utility taking off probably makes it fine, maybe, I don't know, is that it's hard to kill and an ability that just lets it heal above hard to kill on your enemies in activation.
Mm-hmm.
With defense 7, that makes it sometimes just impossible to deal with.
I honestly wish they did Aura Course the opposite way.
Spot for it to be.
Yeah. That is the most annoying part.
For 10 stones that it gets to do is just make it not able to be attacked in defense if it's activated already. Fine. If you're costing 10 stones, you better do something good.
Yeah, and he's walk 5, and he's pretty slow. I mean, he just doesn't ignore anything. He's pretty slow. His attack stat's not the greatest. 246 is kind of like a meme damage track where it's more about getting lucky.
You get one or two good focused hits in over the course of the game, and maybe that's good enough to help.
Yeah, unless they're like rezzers or hard to just have hard to wound, or are henchmen or are stat 6 as well. Yeah, it's so situational. I just never like 246
stones on it, and that's fine.
Yeah,
probably.
Either way, I was never the biggest fan of Intrepid. I don't actually think I care too much about the Aura of Courage change because I was always just super unlucky with the TNs and never healed on my duels anyways, and I'm still not going to heal my opponent's duels. So it was a model that was I know a lot of people disliked because of how like RNG good it is. And honestly, I'm fine with them changing stuff like that. Like things that are situationally, if you just flip well, are just amazing versus consistency is the big reason I don't like this model. And because it can be very good or it can literally do nothing.
Speaking of RNG and consistency.
Yeah, speaking of RNG and consistency, we move on to our next model. Holy crap, thank God they changed this model.
Yeah, this was, I think, up in the rankings for, if not the best model in Bayou, just one of the best models. It did so many things well. It did so many things well. It had an Obey that you could build in suits for. Obey is just an amazing action. It's incredibly flexible. You see lawyers hired all the time for that reason. But then it also just had a heal. It drew you cards. Its heal was card positive, even though it was a stat 7. It let you effectively fix your weaks into relevant cards and more or less draw 2. Gave you shielded onto your whole crew. Sometimes this model needed touched, and it is now very narrow.
Yeah, so I guess we'll just quickly go over the changes. Obey is gone. The Deja Vu draw trigger's gone. They now have Consolidate Power, though, which is, I don't know, a little cool.
Maybe.
Yeah. But the more important thing is they got Surge on Protected Spirit, so they still at least get to draw a card. And are encouraging you to actually use that ability instead of just flipping the card and not caring what happens. Because it's always in your back line. Healing Energy stat got buffed up, so it's more reliable. And then they lost Big Voodoo, but gained Blast Resistant +2.
Blast Resistant. This model is very clearly made to be better at its job in Whizbang. Before it was kind of a Swamp Fiend model in some ways. It didn't quite fit in Whizbang. Blast Resistant +2 means that you don't have this awkward thing where you're hitting your Bakor for 2 damage. There's another buff to Wong where now that 1 damage also just gets healed off. So you don't have this awkward dance where you're playing yo-yo with your model's HP pool. His glowy generation is health neutral, which is amazing for how you can just manage your resources in that crew. Healing Burst was always mostly just relevant in Whizbang as well, so restricting the triggers and healing energy to Healing Burst really focuses it on just being Whizbang support there. And then the interesting one is Big Voodoo. That trigger, before they could only pass focus to keyword models, And now they can pass a focus to minions specifically. I don't know who that's relevant for, though.
Other parcours, yeah, I have no idea.
Yeah,
Your
it's
range 8 attack.
interesting.
I'm so happy to be allowed to use
Yeah.
pass tokens against gremlins again.
Yeah.
As like a big proponent of always spend pass token, so I'm pretty happy to see it gone.
It's a much more narrow model. It's just a regular 6 Soulstone support model now that sees play in Whizbang sometimes. I think.
Pretty decent nerf, still viable in Whizbang, probably only.
Yeah, I'd have to be playing a pretty unique Zareta crew to bring Bakors, I think.
Yeah. All right, onwards to Rami.
He's fine.
Yeah, I'm honestly surprised he got nerfed in the first place, but he's now cost 7. He gets 7 health. He loses advanced sights and picks up expert shot. And he lost the swift action.
Concealment anymore.
Yeah, he lost the swift action and no witnesses triggered, and he gained staggered. So overall, he no longer knows concealment, and he actually has a more relevant trigger on his clockwork rifle.
Yeah, before it was he just had 2 armor piercing triggers, which was a little weird. I couldn't build anything in since he was an enforcer anyway. He's still just a good model. He's a tech pick. But before he was just a stone too cheap, and now he's not, so it's fine.
Yeah, I do definitely think that staggered. Playing someone who uses Crypsis cores like a good amount, staggered on a range 24 gun is huge.
Yeah, not ignoring concealment makes the range 24 a little awkward, but
yes, really awkward, honestly.
14 focused shots is kind of where he was usually at anyway, I think.
Yeah.
But now he's much more reliant on focus, so that definitely limits his out of keyword. Just generic utility a good bit.
I honestly would be surprised if this model's picked at all. The unreliability of the triggers, I think, is actually like just too huge. Like, they're good triggers, all of them, but they're armor piercing, situational, staggered, situational, crit strike you want probably most of the time, and you just can't guarantee any of these. And
the thing that saved his unreliability before was just that he was costed too cheaply.
Yeah.
So yeah, that having been fixed, he probably is much more keyword restricted now.
All right. Now we're going to go into the heavily nerfed masters, and we get to start that off with, I honestly think, a master that'll never see competitive play again, Nexus 1. I really am on the Nexus is dead list. For Nexus 1, Nexus 2 is amazing. So they got the replacement already put in, and I think you're just going to see a quick shift over to that replacement because everything that Nexus 1 now does, Nexus 2 just does better. Those changes are going to be that Citizens of Malifaux now treats the summoned eyes and ears as if they've already activated, so they're pretty much mindless. So they basically get mindless through the Citizens of Malifaux action. You can only ever summon 3 of them, and then you also got the stat reduced by 1, or the TN increased by 1. Either way, I think it cost 1 more. Yeah, because the stat went up to 7, but the TN went up to 10. It was really weird how they did that, but overall, it costs 1 more. So you're going to need, I think, 12s now instead of 11s, and I don't know why they put the 3, because you can't Red Joker it now anyways with the stat increase to get 4. Omnipresent Influence, the big change everyone's been asking for, it's now an aura. So that's the change that everyone wanted and everyone expected. In order to balance that out a little bit, they made it size 3, so you can see overall your height 2 models. But you're still obviously going to have buildings, force, and everything get in the way of that. Severe Injury now replaced with Blood Loss, which is kind of a nerf, arguably, because you don't need to damage anybody for them to get injured, which is, that's pretty nice. but you can't get injured too, obviously. The last one is Siphon Life got changed with Tear Off a Bite. So the model is now only going to heal 2 instead of doing +1 damage and healing 1. That also kind of sucks, but oh well. The big thing that got changed is not on her herself, and I realized I didn't actually pull this up. So give me 1 second, and you can just talk about it. But her upgrade got changed by a lot.
Yeah, so the biggest thing that's going to change how you interact with Nexus is that getting a parasite is still a death sentence, but it's now a slower death sentence and one that doesn't stop you from interacting with the enemy crew.
Yeah, so they hit this. Yeah, they hit this twice. Now it doesn't do irreducible damage. It's just 2 damage. That one kind of makes sense. When you gain the second parasite token. The other big change is actually to We Are Legion itself. Did they just change literally every card's We Are Legion, I guess? Or did they change
it's not We Are Legion. It's the part about considering...
Yeah, considering people friendlies, which is going to be also on the parasite graphs. So basically, they're only considered friendly models on friendly activations. So before, enemy models would attack your Cadmus model with We Are Legion, and they would get to pass the damage back to you. And now they just can't do that. So you're only passing damage done to a friendly model to an enemy model on your turn when you hit your own friendly models, for example. The Mites is going to be another one where you take 2, so you can take 1 still, pass 1 off, and then do another. Overall, though, I think that's probably one of the most massive nerfs, along with the Irreducible, where it's really going to see... It's just steadily hits, like, they hit everything the crew did, and it was a crew that, while it was very good, most people found super annoying to play against, so kind of understandable why they hit it a bunch. Because it was just... The play experience wasn't great.
Generated an enormous amount of value, and the thing that really set it apart from other crews that generated similar value was how quickly they could move that up the board and have it be in your face and taking actions. The lack of mindless on the summons, lack of any real summoning downside, really made it just like a tempo faster than anything that was generating that much value should really be. And so hitting that by giving them the mindless, hitting that by making it so that you can only get 1 husk a turn, really toned down those 2 areas. And those are the 2 areas where it was just obviously way beyond anything else, to the point where it was just the best at what it did out of anything on the game by an entire tier. So you just couldn't fight it, and you had to just not play their game and hope that they didn't get points by playing that game.
Yeah, I mean, that was always the reason why you never saw Nexus picked like everywhere, is because even though it played that attrition game, our current gaining grounds makes that not amazing, which is why when you saw Gaining Grounds 2 change over, you saw a decent amount of Nexus play drop off, because they were always really bad at scoring strat and scoring the current scheme list pools that we have. So really, their only shot at winning was to use this overwhelming value engine they had to move up the board, take control of it, and try to remove you off the board ASAP, because if you have any good interaction with them, then it's not hard for you to take like a 1 or 2 point game from them.
I think Nightsoul Creeper and the Damned are good models that can score points.
Stop it. As someone who's played with both those models, I'm going to tell you immediately, they're hilariously frail, and that's the reason you just don't see them scoring the points that we are scoring currently. Because, for example, like Kick the Can, you really need a model that can stay on the board and move up it and not be inherently threatened by just a model like breathing on it. And that's actually, I will stand by, that's a lot where the Damned and the Creeper are at for their cost, at least. And basically every faction has a cheaper option that does the same job pretty much equivalently or better than they do.
I think you're underselling defense 6, armor 1, stat 7 attack models a little bit, but it's well, you will see what people do with the keyword going forward. It definitely is not the overwhelming mass that it was before.
What?
And it's much more thematic.
What model are you talking about?
Night Slip Reaper.
He's not armor 1.
Effectively armor 1.
I mean, no, literally never anymore. And he was never effectively armor 1 because he never gave out parasite tokens, which is why he actually was...
Your Legion, you have to play around your summons.
No, because the whole point is he would be off by himself. I could argue this forever, and I will probably have these conversations in the future with people. Mm-hmm. I might actually make a whole podcast talking about the state of Malifaux. I think we're going to do a tier list, so that's probably where I'm going to get a little more in-depth with Explorers. I could talk forever. We do have a couple things left to mention about the Nexus changes. We Are Legion got side grade buffed. The stat TN went down.
Cadmus.
Yeah, sorry. Will Cadmus got a side grade buff. The TN went down, so you now only need a 4, which is pretty nice. And then the other big buff to it is a big buff.
It's a variable.
It's a huge nerf. What am I talking about?
But it's 2 less.
The mascot had to succeeding test, and now you have to win duels. Which is pretty huge. So I honestly, all these together, I'm going to stand by it. I think Nexus 1, it went from like a Gaining Grounds, from a Gaining Grounds 2 perspective, went from like a low S tier, high A tier to now just like a model that is probably like C. And you won't really see this version of Nexus played competitively.
Unwilling Servant is obviously really good with nests. You can deploy them from the shadows and then ignore their insignificant only when it scores you points.
Okay, but so Nexus,
yeah, ability to have access to,
it's weird. It's like Nexus 2 just has it stapled on 3 models. But yeah, well, again, we can talk about this later. I'm going to stand by it as the person who plays Nexus. I'm going to take the high ground and say I really do think Nexus has been reduced to a B or C tier master, at least in the current game, where a lot of the new masters that came out obviously raised the power level, I think. So that's Cadmus. We're going to move on for them. That's a talk for a different later. Now we get to talk about the other Explorer's master that got hit with the nerf hammer, Ivan.
Lost Umbra. That's probably the biggest change that's relevant to talk about on this card.
I think Penumbral Converter range nerf is the other biggest.
But those are the 2, I think.
Yeah. I do think those are probably the only 2 that actually matter. The other ones are things that are small changes that honestly make sense for him to be nerfed with. These are the ones where it's kind of hit us out of left field, I would like to say.
I would say these are pretty obvious nerf. I think they nerfed him in a really smart way. So what they did is, the biggest problem with Ivan is that he has this enormous reach where he can affect most of the board. He has this huge offensive potential where he can just reach out and touch you at 10 inches, ignoring all defensive techs, and just drop a summon on you. They nerfed that a little bit, but I don't think in a way that really mattered. There was a cheeky thing you could do, which is if they declined to cheat on a low card, you could put a low crow in and make a Umbra. That's fine. It happens sometimes, but it's not like that was what made him good. What made him good was that reach, and that he was incredibly hard to deal with, because he obviously has this ability to blank damage. He's hard to put conditions on because of his totem. And then if you ever went in on him and didn't kill him, then he just, no TN, has Gibson come in, heal him up a bunch while drawing cards. It's just such an enormous resource swing that it's probably a game-losing proposition to take that approach.
All right.
So,
and I'm
targeting his offense, they targeted his defensive capabilities and mobility.
Yeah, I'm going to come in here from the other side and say why I actually think these changes really don't matter, and I'm actually fine with Ivan where he is.
I agree. I think
so.
We're well targeted.
The reason why I think this doesn't hurt Ivan as much as I hear some people complaining about it is because the things that Goodman just talked about, there are things that almost never came up, I think, while playing Ivan. They definitely could in a lot more like play back kind of safest games, but the amount of times I actually healed Ivan with Gibson, and I spammed the hell out of playing Ivan because honestly, before Title Masters, he was basically free wins. He was that ridiculously strong. Probably the best master in the game, if not tied with the best masters in the game. And losing the Umbra keyword isn't going to really change much of that at all, in my opinion. Which is why I think it's a pretty good, like, these are actually I think regardless of like the amount of nerfs he got, I think they're all like decent small changes to just tone down his top end a little bit. So now you can actually commit to those hard, like, go in plays a lot more. The remove the shadow marker plays. Whereas before you could previously like 100% disregard it because it was always a threat to do it.
And I think that's the thing. Like, you didn't see people doing these plays because they were possible.
Right.
There's so many ways of blanking them and making it a losing play that people recognized that and just had to let him do whatever he wanted.
I will say that makes Gibson almost like a question mark. Do you take this model anymore? But probably, because burnout tools for the job, very good. Draw 2 cards. But there is a little more play on that, which is weird because Umbra is a keyword already. You don't want to hire their keyword. Oh, except for Jin. Jin, new broken model. He's going to love it. In every faction in Explorers. But anyways, as I was saying, like, I was not a fan of Encroaching Shadows himself, but it was always nice tech that he had because it's a high TN and the crew really used all of their cards. They had a lot of TNs. If you didn't hit them, you used them. So having Encroaching Shadows not affect himself is going to come up rarely, but the times it comes up is obviously going to be sad. You no longer have that tool in your toolbox. Sustaining Shadows, losing others is literally just doesn't matter because he's not an Umbra model anymore. Black Soulstone, they changed the stat in TN, but it's the same basically because they're both reduced by 1. So that change doesn't matter either. It's really just Penumbral Converter, I think, is actually like the hard hit to English Ivan.
Yeah.
All the other changes are kind of like situations that rarely came up, but now can come up, actually. And Penumbral Converter is the biggest change because now you have to really care about where Ivan is standing himself, as opposed to just having this range 6. Any scheme marker is now your scheme marker.
You just
and a shadow marker is now your scheme marker.
So many schemes without having to expend a lot of positioning effort into it.
Yeah.
That it's big, but it's completely fair. To have him commit a little bit more to do something that's quite strong.
So I think this is a pretty nice tone down of this card overall. I think this is actually the Explorer's nerf that I can actually really get behind. He needed a toning down of his card. This is perfect, I actually think. It increases his play around weaknesses, where now you can actually go in and do the things against him that were important. The last change that we didn't really mention...
Encroaching Shadows.
No, we mentioned Encroaching Shadows. Intercision. He can Encroaching Shadows himself, just in case, but I'm pretty confident I mentioned that. Intercision, though, the summon ability, now has to be a 14. This means that you can't get in there with your hilariously low crows. I can't actually tell you the amount of times I've summoned when someone's Black Joker, the defense, and I use like a 1 of crows. And it's definitely a feels bad moment. So you're probably going to see a lot more stoning for crows. That's pretty much how he always played anyways. It was just sometimes you got hilariously lucky.
It's an 8 or better.
It's not a big deal.
It was usually an 8 or better if you got it off. So.
Yeah, it was pretty much... This is just curtailing his luck a little bit. This is why I really do actually like the changes to English Ivan, because all the changes are very small, in my opinion, and don't really affect how you played him much from a standpoint. Obviously, Gibson not being able to heal him is kind of significant, but Gibson's slow as hell, normally never got up the board near Ivan, and most of the models you were hearing were your backline anyway. So it's gonna change a couple key matchups with that change overall, but not the vast majority of your matchups. Vast majority of matchups are almost unchanged with English Ivan.
On the other side of the matchup, though, it completely changes how you face even English Ivan. And range of strategies available to you.
So now you can actually a lot more kind of try to threaten him and maybe force him backwards instead of him just waiting out your damage. And then, I mean, obviously with destruction, I think terrain destruction being a big thing is going to allow the the Gibson nerf to maybe shine a little bit more than I'm thinking it will, but overall, especially the way I played Umbra, which no one else really does, which is heavy on Nocturne, heavy on Shadow Marker creation. Gibson really was never my survival method for Ivan himself. So we'll see. It's definitely going to impact some people's play, but overall, I actually like these nerfs on Ivan a lot. These are really actually the only Explorers nerfs I'm actually behind. Archivists, I understand they needed to change. I just think a lot of them were too heavy-handed. This one, I think, is a good example of taking small nerfs instead of like huge whacks at them.
Some other things got adjusted before we move on to Wong and Rasputina are Karis, Hoffman, and Curator.
We want to mention those right now? Yeah.
Pillars, blocking stuff off. Karis had a weird combo where you could stack up a bunch of burning and then hit something for 14 end of turn, which is silly.
No, it's more like 25. I got it to do 25.
Lots of damage. It was dumb. So just basically infinite damage stacking that one-shotted model. So it's gone now. So it's cool.
Is that's in the game rules text, right? Oh, I think I closed out the game rules text.
So Curator and Karis are the ones that exist right now that are affected by that, but it also does affect
here we go.
Things that deal 5 damage and could potentially deal 5+1 to things. Now they're capped at 5, so that's
it's going to affect
nerf to Brewmaster. I think not incredibly minor. It's a nerf to Brewmaster.
So I think that the other thing that you're actually like heavily leaving out is it's a pretty decent nerf to the Seamus. No, the whole keyword, experimental keyword as a whole, because this also caps the healing you get from the poison condition, and I think routinely you would, at least the way I played McMorning 2, your healing would actually be above 5 sometimes. Not even that hard to get to, but it was definitely possible to get to above 5 damage and poison, so that you basically had regen 5. And now you're capped at 5 instead of being capped at, like, I think feasibly it'd be like 8.
I think.
Yeah.
Is where that breakpoint happens.
So I think that's just more going to entail how the crew is built, which is fine. The Karis thing needed to be changed, and I think like blood poison being able to do, and that was already capped at 5, wasn't it?
You could get +1 with Brewmaster Aura.
Oh yeah,
and put it to 6.
So a very small nerf there.
Around the edges of pretty extreme situations. Besides those two.
So this honestly just balances the hell out of Karis and Corpse Curator, which we called for the second we found out that those were able to. So good on them.
While they were at it, they fixed McMorning being able to pass out any ability to any model. It's just locked keyword now. It always should have been. I don't know how that made it out of testing in the first place. It was a very general action. Someone was going to break it. They broke it. It's gone now. We're moving on with their lives.
Also, on top of that, so I guess I might as well just bring up the McMorning card at this point. They did also change how his upgrades gets handed out. It now, when you hand them an upgrade, they discard their upgrade.
Yeah, so no upgrade stacking. I don't know how big that was.
Huge.
To try to stack all of the upgrades on one Super Saiyan model. I know that's what some people were playing around with. It was pretty good, but who knows if that was the dominant strategy, because it's only been out for a month. So
I will say it's the dominant strategy, mostly because Corpse Curator was already really frail, and even Rogue Necro with as much healing was kind of frail, and having 2 upgrades, or 3, really made it so that you could never kill them, because the whole, pitch the upgrade to reduce the damage down to 0 was, by reduce it to 2 down to 0 was pretty broken.
Yeah, it definitely helped keep on the table, I'm sure.
Yeah. So that's a nice little change. The other master we have to talk about is Wong got completely changed.
Oh, Wong didn't get completely changed. Wong got a couple quality of life little reworks. Launch into space. They clarified who owns the markers and how that all works. So that's cool. That was a little weird and not entirely clear before. That's been completely clarified. Instead of counterspell, he got good counterspell, which is just at infinite range in opposed duels. Enemy models cannot declare triggers at all. It is great. It's cool to see them actually buff Counterspell, because that's, like I mentioned earlier, just a weirdly unreliable ability.
Oh, yeah.
He went up to defense 6, which is great. He just didn't have mastery level stats before. Now he does. So that's nice.
Iron Fan got up to 6 damage too.
Yep, Iron Fan going up to stat,
or stat 6, not 6 damage. That'd be insane.
Yeah, this was his disengage tool before. Before, Wong was extremely vulnerable to just being engaged by anything, and his only tool for getting out, which was his reposition trigger on Iron Fan, was at a stat 5, and it was just hilariously obnoxious how not self-sufficient the model was.
But now you don't need to worry about getting engaged at all, because it's no longer a gun action.
It's not a gun action anymore, and this is exactly the fix that every time I talked about Wong, I was arguing for, is that Fizzap is the core ability on this master. It is what his entire keyword is built around, is him being able to do this action. And the fact that just being engaged by anything took this already unreliable TN-focused shockwave action and made it completely useless was just unacceptable for modern master design.
Well, don't also leave out that not only is it not a gun, you gained a built-in Cataclysm trigger to drop a second shockwave marker.
And so they nerfed that degree to some degree. Before, he just automatically got 2 shockwaves. Now they moved it to a trigger, but it's built in, but now it competes with Surge. So they nerfed his card draw a little bit more. He's a little bit more vulnerable to stunned. But overall, I don't think that's the biggest deal, especially compared to how good it is to not being on a gun. But the other really big thing is that he got protective glow on the glow. And so this is the thing I mentioned before, where this is 2 things. One, it's an extra glowy for everything in range. In addition to one you're already putting out, it also heals them 1. All of your models in keyword now have blast resistant, either 1 or 2. I think 2 for the most part. So if you're zapping your crew, then you're glowing them, you are completely health neutral for the turn. You're +3 glowy on your whole crew that got hit by those. So it just really turned up the efficiency of glowy generation, cleaned up some of the vulnerability he was having with activation order and being able to play with health pools, because you could very often end up in a situation where you couldn't actually use your glowy generation engines because it risked getting a model fast and with lots of glowy that then just didn't get to activate because it was dead. It was just the chronic problem with Wong, and they've done a number of things to really help tone down how vulnerable the crew is to those things. And so I think this crew is playable out of 10.
Well, I think you actually missed out on what I think is the most significant buff that Wong got. And that's launched into space is now any marker, which is pit trap markers. So Wong can
already do that, but it was jankier before.
I mean, he couldn't do it. He had to target a scheme scrapper corpse marker.
So if you take sparks,
okay,
you get to treat it.
Now you just make a pit trap marker.
Yes,
and you start duplicating pit trap markers underneath your enemies, and that's huge. I honestly think that that's going to be pretty disgusting to see. Not looking forward to seeing it on the other side of the board.
Yeah, that's a nice buff. You're right. That got less janky and more reliable. So
yeah, you now just do it, and you do it in a very terrifying manner. And then we get to go onwards to the last change in the errata, unless we forgot something. And if we did, feel free to tell us.
Change of the entire packet
for both me and you, because this used to be one of my favorite masters. It was never a viable master. Still might not be on a competitive level, but I think it's definitely getting up there. And that's the rework of Rasputina. Woo!
Yeah, she just draws 3 extra cards a turn. She's pretty good.
I mean, she does a lot more than just that.
I think that's the banner change on this card, though, is that she just has 3 extra cards a turn. And she gets them by cheating fate or discarding a card, which, you do.
Yes.
Yeah. Her chronic problem was running out of resources sooner than the opponent when her entire point was resource constriction. And now that's less of a problem.
Yeah, so what he's talking about is after you cheat fate or discard a card during your activation, you can draw a card. You can only draw up to X cards. This way, where X is equal to the number of ice pillars within 8, max 3. So that's where the cap of 3 is coming from. And this ability allows her to actually, play the game with her ice pillars instead of before, where you would just not have a hand of cards and couldn't use ice pillar triggers. So this is a really nice change. Defense 5 is definitely also really nice. I don't know why she was ever defense 4. That was kind of a meme. The argument was she was never supposed to be attacked, but that never really worked out. Yeah, you got a whole mobility across ever. So Shatter got replaced with December's passive.
Shatter was always so bizarre of a trigger where you're putting resources into making those pillars and then just getting rid of one for a questionable TN. It was just like, why? Why is this such a terrible bonus action? And now she has a real bonus action.
Yeah, so December's Passage, it's a little bit similar to Karai's ability, kind of, not really. Yeah. So you target an ice pillar, you choose any number of December models within 2 of the target, and increase the TN of the action by combined size of all the chosen models. Push the target 4, ignore friendly December models, and place all the chosen models within 2 of the target.
Baseline 4 6.
Just going to warp your crew.
10 inches. That's the baseline here. And it gets better from there.
Yeah. It gets a lot better from there. I mean, it's pretty nutty, honestly. It's going to be pretty great. Competing with Mole Men for moving your crew, but remember, you got Cult Geist, which literally are the ice pillar, so you can target them. And push them as well, so that's also really nice. So you get yourself, you get Cult Geist, and you get all the things by Cult Geist, and so it's and then you get the Cult Geist movement. So I think you got a lot of nice support coming for Rasputin with movement. She no longer has reposition, which sure, fine, whatever.
She doesn't have a melee attack anymore.
Yeah, which is probably fine.
It is. She has Freeze Over, which is a shockwave that doesn't require a gun, so she always has something to do, even if she's engaged. And December's Passage, as mentioned, is a get out of engagement free card, so she's fine.
Yeah, and even though you don't have reposition, you have Mass Hysteria, and the best part is Winter Strike has picked up a nice little blast on the weak action. So against crews that clump and you don't have any damage reduction, it's just going to be massed low on your models. So a second coming of Net Gun. And
the other big thing in here is that +1 damage. The problem with her chill trigger was always that it required that it actually damaged the model, which against henchmen or shielded or armored could get really unreliable. Pushing that up 1 point makes stoning to reduce that to 0 significantly less reliable.
Yeah, so the target's going to be taking 3 damage on a min now. Because if any of the actions blast marker touching an ice pillar, you're going to have a blast marker touching an ice pillar if you want it. I think we're going to be seeing a lot of the Cult Geist moving forward. Ice Golem in the face. I think it's going to be really interesting and fun.
One potentially big thing is that her Shockwave did actually lose a damage. It doesn't actually deal damage anymore. But I think there's a lot of things available to her that make up for that. And what they did is they actually gave it a lot more flexibility. Where you can actually have one trigger which increases the size of the Shockwave by 1, which is huge. Shockwave 2 is dramatically more area covered than Shockwave 1. And then they also made it so you can just do damage 2 on one of them. So the other thing is that Cult Geist being a real model that you can take and can potentially reposition with December's Passage means that you potentially can shove a Cult Geist into the middle of people, then slam them with these 4 shockwaves, even though they're not necessarily doing damage, except maybe one of the triggers does. Anytime they gain slow a second time, they're taking a damage ping. which ends up being similar to what it kind of would have done before. So
Yeah. Losing Onslaught's kind of large, but I don't think it matters much because now you're also much more incentivized to take focus attacks with the Winter Strike.
I was stuck on Swift Action versus Cruelty now, but yeah.
Oh yeah, sure. The Swift Action on Freeze Over got replaced by 3 pretty nice triggers.
Yeah, basically Swift Action is once per turn now. So you are incentivized to do things other than freeze over 6 times.
Yeah,
which would have been the play most of the time otherwise. But it got a heal. Yeah,
I don't know. I'm big on Winter Strike being... Blacks on Min is huge when you have a trigger that gives slow to everybody. And that was always the unreliable thing about Winter Strike was... not being able to... One, you didn't want to declare triggers because obviously it costs you a card. Now it's the cycle of your worst card to drawing to a better card. So now you're incentivized to declare triggers. Yeah. 2, you get to now... if you do end up doing min damage, you are perfectly fine knowing... depending on if you can know other models can't ignore the damage or not. So that's going to come up a lot more. When it's just like, oh, an Enforcer standing next to a henchman, well, just attack the henchman, stone for the tome, do the damage, blast, hit him for 3, blast 1 onto the guy on the worst case scenario. So you can now play also hitting henchmen and hard to wound models a lot more, whereas before it was just like, shit.
Yeah, and one of the plays that this opens up is that you can go with your Ice Golem earlier in the turn, not having had to commit it into where you want it to be, and just wait to see where they commit. On her activation, you can drop your damage to hazardous Blizzard Aura into the middle of their crew, and then just mass hysteria them in the middle of your Blizzard. That's a threat that exists now that didn't before.
Yeah, so she has a lot more threats, and I'm very tempted to declare Arcanist our next Vassal tournament because I want to play Raspy more because she seems pretty close to competitively viable with this version. I think, especially mostly because the Cult Geist provide a lot of additional support that the crew's been hammering for, and so the crew's been steadily getting a lot better, and this might push it over the edge. Because unfortunately, as much as I tried to hype up Raspy 2, I
think Raspy 2 still does have some quite solid tools.
It's fine. Just because you're giving armor to the models you're summoning doesn't mean them good models.
Having the option to pick between the two of them, though, takes it to a whole other level. Because now they actually have to respect both of them.
Because before, Raspy 1 was never viable. I don't think ever. Okay. Ice Pillars, you can actually declare the trigger when drawing through line of sight on an Ice Pillar, creating the Ice Pillars. I mean, it's just so much like more value now that you can always declare triggers.
Spamming 6 pillars out in a turn, I don't think. I think that it could be a very legitimate Rasputin activation now, which is cool. Harsh Winter, I think, got better too. Yeah, there's just a lot of support everywhere.
Yeah. I think that wraps us talking about Raspy. So I think we're going to do some closing thoughts if we want. Is there anything in this errata that you wanted to see but didn't?
Wanted to see but didn't. I think so, but it's not coming to me offhand.
I will mention my thing that I really wanted them to answer was... for a while, it's been basically TO rulings on Vassal tournament rulings, is whether or not Grave Goo inside of an aura generated, for example, by the Kurgan or the Moray turns that aura hazardous damage 1/+1 poison, because that is kind of unclear whether or not those auras have a base, which is what the Grave Goo uses to determine is being in base contact. And are you in base contact with an aura? TOs have ruled this. I've had actually, I think every in-person TO rule it that it does work that way. The Vassal ruling rules it that it doesn't work this way. I don't think it's clear. So it's just, up to the air in your TO, and that's something I would have really liked. I think that was, for me, it was the most clear FAQ besides healing timings finally needing to actually have a chart that I really wanted to get out there. As for, obviously I want more buffs on weak models, but those take really long time to consider and think through, so I like the ones they did now. I think all the nerfs were kind of hit. I'm not really sure if there's a master I really want to be nerfed, knowing that they wouldn't nerf any of the new stuff, really. Obviously they hit McMorning and Seamus, but that's because the McMorning one was because it was utterly disgusting and it needed to be changed immediately, and the Seamus one was because it should never have worked that way.
Yeah, and overall, I think it just did a great job. If anything, Molman might have been touched a little bit too much, but
we'll see. Yeah,
I think it's pretty fair. Maybe overnerfed a couple Explorers models a little bit, but yeah, that's potentially unfortunate. Unless they come back through with buffs on Explorers models. Oh, that's the one. Kaya. I think it's pretty criminal if they went through and hit all of the stuff this hard and then didn't touch Kaya, who is just bad. He's too expensive. He doesn't do enough.
Well, interesting.
And it was just an obvious spot to give some love to Explorers.
I think I actually agree with them not hitting Kaya for one reason and one reason only, and that's EVS Title 2 is almost too strong, and she's actually pretty decent in it.
That's possible. I haven't seen as much of the title EVS.
Yeah, the only reason, and I'll say this now because obviously I titled this Explorers Are Dead, and I ragged on how dead I think Nexus is, and how dead basically all the quote-unquote versatile models that Explorers was hiring and everything else are dead. I really don't think Explorers are dead for two big reasons. For any of you guys who are playing in-person tournaments or just tournaments online that allow double masters, I think Nexus Kids 2 plus Ivan is probably one of the most busted combos that exists in the game at the moment, and I don't think the Ivan changes did anything to affect that, because obviously you're not hiring Ivan's crew in it, so it doesn't matter if he's titled Umbra or whatever. The 6-inch aura is the only thing that changes anything there. And to continue on to that, it's just Nexus Kids 2 are really strong, and Jin Bakura was such a good addition into Explorers that it's a straight replace for Archivist. Anytime you would take Archivist, you can just take Jin instead. Beeb Calypso is really the only problem I think Explorers have. They don't have another good scheme and strat runner that's just like that standout good. And for them to be competitively viable, you might need to start taking lists that have it inherently a bit more. And that's going to be, I think we're going to be seeing a lot of Nexus 2 who do it by just having a lot of AP activation and the same thing you were talking about, which is making insignificant models significant. And then you also have the criminally underrated birds. I think the birds, the Hyperion Eagles, I don't remember their full name, but the Eagles that Cooper got are going to be probably taken more now as well, maybe even outside keyword, because I really do honestly hate pretty much all the good strat runners for flipping markers in Explorers, because I talked about Vernon and Wells and that stuff, and I don't think there's a good solid replacement for Beeb Calypso in that respect. Obviously, GG3 is going to be very dependent on where Explorers stand, and then if they gain any new models that help them do that. Otherwise, I think it's not hard for them to, most keywords, I think it's not hard for them to replace Beeb Calypso with a keyword model. Umbra is the only one I think that most people are going to be like, what the hell do we do with this? And the answer has been in your face all along. Hire Crypsis Core. They're fucking bonkers broken, dude. So that's my Explorers Aren't Dead Yet. Crypsis Cores, there's a lot of really good Explorers models people have been sleeping on. My big one's Crypsis Core. It's not helping you score schemes and strats. The big downside, you're going to have to do that with other models, and that's the only question mark in my mind, is who's going to replace Beeb Calypso for the strat pushing strategies, because he was a big reliant, and I think the answer honestly is you just still hire Calypso. It goes off to the side was pretty much always the point, and it wasn't really attacked in the first place when it was doing these strategies, and so it's still there, and you're still kind of fine. not being able to push people away from you. Obviously, huge downside. You need to win an attack action now. Not the end of the world, but it is kind of sad.
Yeah, and as you have mentioned, biggest hit is against in-corp models because it does no damage to them at all.
Yeah, and with the... I mean, obviously, you guys have, if you've been watching this channel, you've been seeing me spam Cry 2. I think it's going to be a terror on the list when people start playing it, because at the moment, I think I'm the only one playing it, which kind of blows my mind. Because the other Reser...
Explorers.
Yeah, because the other Reser players are like kind of enjoying, like, Make Morning obviously is broken, and then I know Brian's a big Von Stuck fan, and I think he just loves Von Stuck personally because I think power level wise he's a little bit lower, still very good, so can definitely be played competitively, but I just don't think is quite at that level. But either way, yeah, it's a pretty niche hit, but I don't really see Explorer's answers to it. And I think the answer is going to be, unfortunately, it's going to be Nexus 2. I think we're going to be seeing a lot of Nexus 2 out of Explorers because with just the sheer amount of AP, it kind of answers all these problems by just having you under the trigger of too much AP. Plus the whole gain of Parasite still does a damage, so you can hurt incorporeal models that way. So, I don't know. It's going to be fine. People wanted Explorers dead so much, too. Honestly, I think people would be a reprieve from seeing as many Explorers as they kind of were seeing. New faction is always going to attract a lot of attention and a lot of hate because people are just going to be playing against it a lot. And I think overall, while some of the nerfs obviously I think hit the models too hard, as we talked about, I think they're in a pretty fine spot from a totality. You're just not going to... Those models are just gone. And I think that's fine on the most part. EVS2 has answers. Beam Calypso's still kind of fine there. And honestly, I think that's the part where it's going to be like this model now is just a really good model in EVS2 and not a broken model, which will be nice. And we'll see, obviously, Archivist in other areas. But yeah, I think Explorer's a pretty fine spot. Is there... I don't want to talk too much about this. I think I've said everything. I've said it like twice now. The last closing thought I'll ask is a model you wanted buffed but didn't get buffed.
Besides Gaia.
Yes. Because I guess if you can find a model you want to nerf then I guess that's the question you still haven't answered.
Not that comes immediately to mind. I think that they did a pretty great job with this round. There might be some models sitting around that didn't get some love, but they definitely did a good job hitting the most obvious candidates in a pretty, I think, intelligent way. So I am content.
Yeah, I think I'm pretty happy too. I really do like this errata change as much as I'm talking about the woe of Explorers, mainly because I'm not an Explorers player anymore. I'm gone. But no, I'm definitely still playing Explorers in person a lot. I've obviously played Captain Con with it. And I didn't even hire the models that were problematic, I don't think. But as I was saying, overall, this errata has been pretty great. I think we saw all the rules changes we pretty much want, except for, obviously, my problem with Grave Goose still being a giant question mark in my mind. And other than that, I actually can't think of a model I would want buffed. Or is there a keyword? I guess model's too hard, because obviously there's a lot of unplayable models, and we just can't really think of them because they're unplayable. But what's like a keyword you were kind of hoped would be like elevated a little bit? A keyword you never really like see play, but you wish see played more.
Genuinely, Raspy, Wong, and Sui would have been the ones I named, and all of those got
got buffed.
Big buffs and reworks. Yeah, so those are top candidates. I think most of the others are well within the window of playability. Yeah, I like all the ones I can think of, like Red Chapel. I think the Distracted changes and the Sybil changes already hit them pretty nicely. Yuko got some nice title love. No, I think everything's in a pretty reasonable range right now.
Yeah, I will say I'm not the biggest fan of where Jedsa's keyword is, even playing the second title. And with the overall nerf to explorers, even though she didn't really hire those models because she was the one crew that actually was like super incentivized to play in keyword, the nerf to the emissary does hit her the most in my mind. And
Yeah,
I feel like not getting anything to counteract that, and even then hitting Mikhail as well, I feel like maybe a couple for smaller models needed to just be bumped up a little bit. Because Jetsa 2, especially if the Grave Goo Aura thing doesn't work, I played in tournaments where it does work, and it just doesn't feel good. So that's my take on Jedza. It honestly actually just doesn't feel like it feels like looking at it, it looks like it's pretty competitive, but playing it, it just kind of feels eh.
The main weakness that I've seen in my exactly one game of playing into her is that if you don't realize that your master can get abducted into a huge field of hazardous and hostile work environment, then she'll have a bad time. But I don't think that's a keyword defining flaw.
Which is why you just take the emissary.
Threat is huge. Exactly, which is getting back to what you were saying. One reason why the emissary getting hit in the ways that it did impacted her a lot is that she was kind of incentivized to hire the emissary for that reason, because that's one of the few vectors to really deal with her.
And then the other bonus was getting like life tokens on Jedza 2, or
you
just
get life tokens just by passing your TNs, and that was a really efficient way of doing it if you were committing to taking this huge paperweight that sat there in the back and didn't contribute to your team.
Yeah.
And so not even having that utility from the emissary is rough.
Yeah, I'm
really
not sure. I'm not sure what I would do. I would actually like the dam changed a little bit. He is, as you brought him up as a potential alternative to Beeb Calypso, but I really do feel he's too frail every time I run him, even out of keyword. I almost feel like he was just changed.
6 hard wound, 9 wound, 8 stone model.
Yeah, you'd be surprised. I mean, it honestly just comes down to, first of all, not defense 6, so ignore what you said. No, that's why he's like so frail. Like he's a 5/5 on your 8 stone model that you run up the board, and he only has 9 wounds. So even with hard to wound, you're kind of like eh. And remember, he has to like self damage a lot, so you can do the old ways to get like leap off. And stuff like that, which is obviously it's nice having, but you do this damage to yourself. You are putting yourself out there. You're getting hit by anyone with a stat 6 gun, anyone with a stat 6 attack, ignoring being against stat 6 willpower teams where you really just get your butt blasted. And it's just not the model you want up the board doing these things. It's just too frail in my mind. And low willpower means that it's too easy for my opponent, if they do have obeys or something like that, to get them out from the scheme strat kind of range. But that's me. I kind of wish.
Sometimes just lose models though, and then it heals too. It has hard to wound. I don't know.
It's never killing models. Model. It's just not killing models if you're using for scheme strats though. That's the problem. It works really well in Jedza 1, where you can keep it inside the bubble. You use it as a kill threat. You have the heal, deal damage stuff. And it works pretty well in that respect. But from an actually like leave that bubble, it's much more of a late game try to sneak in like 1 extra point using leap, move a strat marker or stuff like that. But I've said my end on that. I do think I would like a little bit of buff to the Seeker overall, especially after seeing those nerfs. But I understand why they did it, because they were a terror outside of keyword. Yeah, and with all that being said, I think we're done talking about the errata change. There was one thing I wanted to mention, just so people would know. They did clarify that Colette, using the doves, gets to ignore the insignificant of the summon conditions because it is her card, period. Which also I think would mean
purposes, Colette is there.
Yeah, which is interesting, because I actually had this come up during tournament play on if she would take hazardous damage, and I think that ruling means that Colette herself would take the hazardous damage from the dove moving, which is interesting, because that's not how RTO ruled it, but it's good to know that that's probably how it works now. I hate that change or clarification. Really wish they just ignored everything and ruled it the other way, because I think she is going to be a terror to deal with. And that's one of the big reasons why. Summon Dove, fucking interact strat. But needs to move it away from your, at least. Not that that's that hard.
Or just shooting her own model to make a dove to then go scheme. She has some really cool tricks available to her that I think in the hands of really good players, they're going to find some really cool ways to play her. So I think it'll be fun to watch moving forward.
Yeah, it'll be fun to watch, and it'll be really annoying to play against. So please don't declare Alpinus against me. I will. It's pretty much. It's the one game I lost to in the Booty and Plunder tournament was Jeremy's Colette from the Bayou Breakdown. And he played Plog's List, and goddamn, dude, that list is a terror. And I was playing Dredza 2, and Dredza 2, not a terror in my mind. That game kind of sealed it for me on like where she is on the power level curves. Overall, I think we said it again. I'll say it again. Good errata. Everything nice happened. We're done. Nothing more to talk about. We're ending it here. So have a good day, everybody. Thanks for watching. Like, comment, subscribe, all that fun stuff. If you stayed with us this long, which honestly, I'd be surprised if you didn't hang up when we said it was done 3 times ago. So yeah.
Great stream.